Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Knights of the Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, welcoming you to a Tuesday stream. Coming in hot. John Bonanza giving us a re-up. Let me take a look here. Here's Henry's. They're stacked up. We've got some loyal followers. Big shout out to those gentlemen for the thing. That's 19 months for Henry and 15 months for John. So love to see it. Thanks so much. We just, by the way, the other day, we missed it because we weren't live streaming, but Philip Bush, aka Combat Medic Bush, and Damian Williams, the Pawn No Longer, 19 months of resubbing just the other day. So big anniversaries, people coming up on 2 years of supporting just the YouTube channel. So anyways, thank you everybody for supporting us. We appreciate it so much. And there's some very nice words in the chat. Shout out to Gabe, who is getting to see this one live. Love to have you here, Gabe. Rule of Cool Can't Sleep. So they're hanging out with us. That is fantastic. Alan believes this should be interesting. I can't decide if they mean interesting in the good way or interesting in the bad way. We'll find out. Sean it. Hello yourself. Keith, the intro music is called Rain Check and is by an artist named Dylan Stitz. Shadram hopes this stream is as positive as Smith's secret preview. Shadram, of course, referring to a special Patreon-only remaster preview that our other Knights of the Last Call co-host Aaron Smith did just a few days ago. It's about 2 hours long, so it's pretty long. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. And Ono Joe gets to catch a stream. What is up, Jackal? Glad to see you. Frost Jack, always a pleasure to see you as well. Let's see. Lollipop is here. KC is here. Sanderson, what is up? Alex, hello. Steinwand, hello. Ooh, Thunder Mammoth is getting a chance to check one of these lives. Well, welcome. Guitar Guy Nick. Hey, what's up, Nick? Damian Williams says, I kind of like the remaster. Yeah, so spoiler alert. You know, self-confessed and starting us off with $2 in before. What are we even doing here? We'll get to that a little bit. We'll get to that. We certainly will. Thank you for that, Vin. Rule of Cool is going to play some FU. Finally, really excited. Well, FU. I'm jealous that you're getting to play some FU. Rule of Cool, of course, talking about Fabula Ultima, the table talk Japanese role-playing game from Need Games, which is pretty sweet. Cybersmith is going to get a first-hand look at how deadly the remasters are in the play-by-post. Satir, welcome. Sorry about the time change, of course, here in the United States. I really love most of the changes, but I'm suffering from seeing the biggest change overshadow all the positive changes, i.e. death and recovery. Yeah, I think a lot of people are talking about that. I mean, we talked about it. We did a whole stream on death and dying and about where I think death exists in the current makeup of tabletop role-playing games. I think the modern game consumer, again, for most people, playing a tabletop RPG is like playing a console RPG on hard mode, where you don't get to save your game, and if you die, your account gets deleted. That's just not the way most people choose to play. And there are certainly games like roguelikes on computers that are designed around that principle. But again, the game itself is designed, it's literally built to expect you to die, not just once, but maybe multiple times. Modern day role-playing games, including Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I don't think handle death in a particularly good way. And so in a way, it's like they've tried to remove it from the equation while still keeping the illusion that it's a problem. The problem is, that illusion sometimes comes to fruition and it's real. But with the new change, potentially you might see some people going down at a higher rate. I don't know exactly what that rate is, but certainly more than before. Grim, great to see you. Love to see it. Matthew Keene is wounded 1, but hanging tough. Jackal Torn Moon says Remaster Ranger is looking at the Remaster Rogue. Isaiah is lurking. Awesome. You're not allowed to buy anything until after Christmas. Well, the good news, Dr. Waits, is it should be next week that I think most, if not all of these changes should be up in Archives of Nethys. And hopefully when the actual print book comes out, Paizo will release some sort of change log or change document, which I think will be important. Space Narwhal says, I'm here for more. My hatred is too big to fit in any one thing. Energy. Not to disappoint. So I have to, let's get this out of the way here first. Which is to say, Jason B coming in with $10.
Jason B tipped $10. ZE game remains the Zara aim. Please enjoy this fully backwards compatible non-edition new edition. Also guys, don't stress the revised death rules. Your GM isn't supposed to let you die anyway, lol smile.
Thank you, Jason B, for setting that wonderful expectation for us. Yes, the game remains the same. Roll for Combat says, wow, I'm really hung up on death and dying. No. The entire community is pretty hung up on death and dying. Believe it or not, that's a big deal to a lot of folks. And yeah, I mean, that is a big deal. So Gossamer, hello, welcome. Derek set his expectations so low that he doesn't actually hate this at all. So that is probably an accurate take. So yeah, let's get it out of the way first. There are sort of two ways that I can view this. One way is to look at it from a perspective of what would I hope? What would I dream, knowing that they could never do this because of, practical reasons, business reasons. But if the folks at Paizo were making a Pathfinder game for me, and still keeping it Pathfinder, not so, they just turned it into Powered by the Apocalypse. No, like it's still Pathfinder, it's still D20, what would that game look like? So on that perspective, they fell short. Of course they did, right? So like, I'm not going to sit here and list off a bunch of huge changes that I think should be in the game. Realistically, they were never going to be in the game. From the perspective of the remaster as what it is, there's a couple of key points I'll make. Number one, I've been a participant in a couple of streams with Roll for Combat, Stephen Glicker, and Mark Seifter. Of course, we've all read through most, if not all, of the PDF documents. I haven't read 100% of everything yet, so if I get something wrong, please call me out. I'll try to get the right information out there. The core takeaway for me is this is a lot more than 2.1. And I'm not saying that as a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying it is a thing. And with the way that these changes have been adapted, I think that they kind of did this in a way that is going to create what I will call maximum confusion, because they took some class features and abilities and they brought them over. They didn't change them. They didn't rename them. Some things got brought over with a new name, but they didn't change it at all. Right? They didn't change, like, it's a new name, but it's the exact same. Elliot coming in with $5.
Elliot tipped $5. Thanks for all the great content.
Ooh.
I've been binging your channel for a while, with my group recently converting to PF2E. Thanks for the honest content.
Well, thank you, Elliot. Again, I appreciate that you appreciate us. Thank you for your vote of confidence, and thank you for the $5. It's very, very, very generous of you, and that means a lot coming from someone who I don't know if you've tipped before, Elliot, but if this is your first time, thank you so much. Whoople coming in, as he often does, with a $50 super chat, says, I see your re-tier the remastered classes, and I raise you all spells remastered. Now, to be fair, we did kind of set the stage with this, which of course self-confessed cynic Vin, of course, immediately shit on me by filling it out. So Whipplestein will probably do it at some point. I mean, there's a lot of changes, and I do think, spoiler alert, I think most of the spell changes are pretty good. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the spell changes tonight, I'm sure. But I do appreciate that people want to take a look at those. And again, I think that in all, they tended to make the spells a little stronger or a little bit better. So I think that's really good, especially in obviously the divine list where it needed it most. So anyways, about the confusion, you have new abilities with old names. You have old names with new abilities. It's like, even if you feel like you know what something does, you're probably going to have to relook. You're going to probably have to go and look it up. Another thing is, quite frankly, Mark and I talked about this the other day. There's still that sort of inconsistency in the way that they name things. A lot of the new class features, which say increase your perception, are called Perception Legend or Perception Master. The Ranger has their level 19 class feature. It is called Medium Armor Mastery, right? It does exactly what it says on the tin. And then there are other places where they say Greater Natural Reflexes, which gives you legendary proficiency, right? So it's kind of like a weird mix of where they sometimes use this kind of flavorful name that doesn't exactly tell you what it does mechanically, and other times they do. So there's definitely some edit, and I guess one thing I will say is this: I get a feeling, maybe you do, this feels rushed, and I think there are a lot of mistakes in this. If you just today on Roll for Combat stream, the Rogue was being covered, and the Rogue obviously starts with good reflex save, good will save, and okay trained fort save, and eventually they get legendary reflexes and they have like a really keen mind. But somebody somewhere, and I'm with Mark 100%, where I agree that this is just a typo. At level, I don't even know what it is, level 9, they get Rogue Resilience, and it says your physique is incredibly hardy. Your proficiency rank for fort saves increases to Expert. When you roll a success on a fort save, you get a critical success instead. Not only does that ability not make any sense on a rogue, it also is coming before their will save gets a save specialization. So that to me is a mistake, right? It's just a line editing error. Books do have issues, but this is it's like when you're selling this as an errata, when you're selling this as a not a new edition, it's just an update. It just feels like it was really, really, really rushed. And I get now Bruno says they had like 5 to 7 months to remaster everything. I don't know. Did they? What would have happened? Like, obviously they felt like they couldn't keep printing under the OGL. Like that was going to be a mistake. And my assumption is that they haven't printed a single book since the OGL disaster. Yeah, that puts you under the wire. And that's an unfortunate set of circumstances. I don't think that they were in a position where they could have done any better. But I kind of agree with what Thunder Mammoth is saying, which is I'm sure they could have taken more time and I think it would have been fine. I just feel like, it's like when I get something and I know no one has even received their print copies yet, and they are already, I promise you, they are already out of date. Because there's just no way that this Rogue Resilience ability is right. And again, there's other instances. We're going to talk about some of those tonight, I'm sure. Again, we're not going to cover anything specifically, but there's just no doubt to me that the Witch's Resentment patron ability for the familiar is unintended, right? Like someone wrote that feature and I either they weren't thinking or didn't know about the existence that, spells like Slow exist, and synesthesia, or again, I'd like to say that was a big buff, but for those of you who are not in the know, the Witch, hold on a second here. Let me see if I can do this. Hey, there it is. And again, we're not going to get into the habit of just showing everybody everything, but so the resent thematic, instead of just being called, curse or fire or fate, right? It's the resentment. It sounds cooler in a way. Anyways, they all have these abilities kind of tied to your familiar. They really wanted to lean into the familiar. And so the resentment has the familiar of ongoing misery. Your familiar seems hostile to all creatures other than you, hissing at them if they get too near. Whenever you cast or sustain a hex, which, let's be clear, is pretty much every round of a combat, your familiar can curse a creature within 15 feet of it, prolonging the duration of any negative conditions affecting it by 1 round. This is a curse effect. And for those of you who may not know this, right, there are plenty of powerful spells in the game, like Slow, where even if the opponent saves, they are slowed for 1 round. A spell like Synesthesia, a spell which, by the way, was not reprinted in Player Core 1. What does that mean? We can kind of talk more about that. Synesthesia, of course, made your character clumsy 3 and all these other issues, and that's when they succeed on the save. Of course, it only lasts for 1 round. I should point out, Synesthesia is an occult spell, and obviously the witches have access to occult magic if they so see fit. Especially this particular witch, the Resentment, who does get the occult spell list. So you have a class which has access to some of the most powerful debuffs in the game, Slow, Synesthesia, and those spells were already really, really good, because even if the boss monster or high level monster that you cast them on saved, they were still going to be affected, which is great. You want to be able to be effective. Now you can just set up a situation where they can never break out of it. There's no save with this. There's nothing that needs to be done. Yes, the boss monster could go and try to kill the familiar. But honestly, if your boss monster or your high level monster is spending actions running around trying to kill the familiar, you're almost winning even more in that case. And so, yeah, it's really interesting that they change certain things to make them more appealing or more powerful. But it's like they created potentially a whole host of new problems at the same time. Cybersmith with 10 pounds says, I don't think the rogue save progression is a mistake. It already worked that way. Fort first, then will. That resentment thing isn't too busted. Familiars are weak. Do you want it that close to foes? I think by and large, the familiar is generally going to be something that most creatures and things are going to ignore. Also, that's what the familiar does. Yeah, I expect people to use the familiar to do the thing that the familiar does. Obviously, they gave you that ability under the aspects that you're going to go ahead and use it. As for the rogue getting that thing, someone getting save specialization on the ability that takes you from trained to expert, not master, trained fortitude to expert fortitude, and getting the juggernaut ability, basically, that seems way off to me. It also seemed way off to Mark Seifter as well. So, and of course, the rich get richer. They came in and they gave these new class features, new class powers to certain classes, like the rogue. The rogue didn't need any help. The rogue somehow got better. And somehow the ranger got better if you're a crossbow warden ranger and you're level 16. It's crazy to me. Again, I know that I am not the target demo, right, for Pathfinder 2, right? The way I interact with the game, my knowledge, my base of things is not what the core person is. But it just seems crazy to me. And again, look, turns out I was playing, quote unquote, Pathfinder 2 wrong the entire time. I've been playing for 4 years because I wasn't playing with the correct wounded rule. But it seems like I am playing a completely separate game than, I don't know, everybody else, or at least the folks at Paizo. And the reason I say that is because the rogue was already so powerful. The gang up feat was already so powerful. And for those of you who do not know, gang up, and we actually did a video, well, we did a stream about this, about the rogue, and Bob clipped it and made a video about how to build a badass, combat rogue. There's a feat, gang up. Gang up says, if your rogue is in combat with a monster and your allies are in combat with the monster, the rogue is treated as flanking, aka the creature is flat-footed, aka off guard, right? So that way your rogue doesn't actually have to get to the other side of the monster. If your fighter buddy is standing next to you, the rogue gets to flank. But guess what? Gang up is now an AoE buff, and everybody in your party is treated as flanking that creature if they're in melee with it, if you are. Like, and here's the thing. I'm not like, oh, that's so powerful and busted, it'll ruin the game. No, I think it's probably fine, but that's not where, that's not the class that needed help. That's definitely not the feat that needed help. I know a lot of people, including myself, who considered that feat kind of auto take,
Jason B tipped $10. So, I know PF2 is perfectly fine as everyone here will agree with, but I wish we had more time. We got the fighter and rogue buffs in which were very needed, but sadly didn't have time for the decompression rules, or editing, Q&A, or any review.
Yeah, I just don't know, how that came to be. I mean, case in point, you can have a rogue now, so rogues can sneak attack with a gnome flick mace from 10 feet away. So you can imagine a fight where you've got a monster, and then there's your fighter's right here, and maybe your magus is right here, and then behind them is your rogue with a flick mace, and everybody is flanking that monster. Again, very powerful, certainly cool, I guess. But is that what the rogue needed? It's just crazy, And so it's just very, very, it's very crazy. Now, on the other hand, there were some much needed changes. The cleric feat list, I played a cleric 1 to 20. And the feats were pretty disappointing, right? They definitely left me wanting. And it was one of those situations where you wanted to, go ahead and take archetype feats. The clerics got some really good feats now. They got some really good feats now. And more than that, they also really helped out the war priest. Now, I know they're still going to lag behind the martial characters at higher level. They get mastery at level 19. So for the last 2 levels of the game, you're in there. But it's still going to be kind of a rough go. But they did give them at least some really cool and interesting feats that I think help the war priest feel more like a 4th edition strength-based cleric, which is never a bad thing. And certainly kind of what I want the war priest to look like. They made divine font stronger by giving you just the max amount of heals without having to go into your charisma. So a cleric, and again, a cleric is a class that I didn't think was particularly interesting. I thought it was strong because I thought heal was so strong, and no class casts heal as good as the cleric. But at least this way you get a little bit more, longitude, sort of latitude with what you're doing as a cleric. So I thought those were really great changes, fantastic changes. So the war priest is better, but it still can't hit stuff. That is correct, Shadram. To be absolutely clear, your war priest is just as good as anybody else, except for a little bit of you're 1 attack point behind, which is fine because you can't start with a strength of 16. And you get to level levels 1 through 4. And at level 5, it's bad. You drop down to being 2 points behind because everybody else becomes a master, or expert, you're still trained, but your strength does go up to 18. And then at level 7, okay, your strength's 18, everyone else's strength is 19. You're expert, they're expert. Level 7, 8, 9, arguably 10 and 11 and 12 are great great times to be a war priest. You'll have enough spells in your repertoire that you can really cast a lot of spells. You're going to feel powerful. Your attack bonus is going to be on par with the marshals. It is a great time to be a marshal. And of course, obviously, you're getting your greater striking runes and your +2 bonuses, your weapons. It's fantastic. Then at level 13, you fall off and you never catch back up. Until 19. Now at 19, you do catch back up. So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 are pretty rough, or 18, not 19, are pretty rough goes for the war priest still. Now, the idea is a war priest can make up for that by, casting a buff on themselves, which is somewhat true, but you could also cast that buff on the fighter, and that would probably be more beneficial, but you never know. So yeah, anyways, I think they did a great job with that. And I don't think the war priest should have the same, not in the way it's currently structured, not with the full spell progression. I don't think it should have the same attack bonus as a barbarian or a ranger or a monk. I don't think that it should. So I'm okay with it, but being like a point behind, I think that would be totally reasonable. But they fixed it at the end, but not in the beginning. But again, overall good changes. They didn't make a lot of changes to the bard, and that's fine. The bard was in a great spot. It wasn't broken. It wasn't bad. I think we gave the bard A's and B's ratings when we did tier rankings. So that felt good and reasonable. But the fact that they came in and buffed the rogue, and arguably, it's not really significant buffing, but they buffed the fighter. But then they basically, in my opinion, did nothing to the ranger. Is just crazy to me. That they would miss on that. So my overall take is, I think from a application standpoint, I think the remaster was a success, right? I think that they came in, they needed to make some changes to some of the classes. They did make, by and large, I didn't see too many nerfs. I saw mostly buffs. I mostly saw increases. I saw them either making things stronger. A lot of things that we have complained about, 8 is too difficult at low level. So they lowered the DC. Cool. A lot of these divine spells are too niche. They combine them. Awesome. Clerics, especially war priests, are too multiple attribute dependent. Cool. You don't really need charisma anymore. It's like, yeah, okay. These are all good and welcome changes. So, again, I think that, don't you consider the new Arbalest weapon a ranger buff? This is a straight up upgrade over the heavy crossbow for rangers. Yes. In the exact specific instance of you being a crossbow ranger, you got yourself an Arbalest. But other than that, and if somebody wants to get that excited about, an extra point of damage, I guess knock yourself out. But, so overall, I think they did a good job. Now, where they did not do a good job, I think, is they still left some significant gaps in some of the class design. I talked about this on Roll for Combat the other day. I still think the Ranger is not a good class. Sorry to say. And I think that some of the changes they made are potentially too powerful and will probably end up getting errataed. Things like potentially this resentment ability from the witch. There's also literal editing mistakes, misspellings, and in what I think are some instances where they, kind of copy pasted wrong, and maybe things got carried over that shouldn't have gotten carried over. They used the wrong text. Again, maybe I'll be proven wrong, but all in all, I think that it was a lot for them to absorb and change, and I don't envy them the task of doing it. But I do think that there's going to be mistakes, and I think there's going to be stuff that is going to get sadly errated pretty early on, I would think. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. What else? And there's also some good quality of life things, which I think is really important. There's that new swap ability. Interact action. Basically, you can, change. You don't have to put away your sword and then draw a new one, right? You can do it in one action. That's great. That's fantastic. I think Pathfinder 2 was a little, I think the design team, I think they were a little too overzealous with this 3-action idea. And I think they tried to make everything an action. You know, I see this a lot of time when people come from 5th edition and they're used to so many things and it being, you know, a free action. Or even if you played 3rd edition or you played Pathfinder 1, you know, you're used to, I'm moving and I can draw my weapon, right? And, you know, the classic example is that, like, if somebody in Pathfinder 2 wants to move through a door, it takes you, like, you know, or is it 2 doors or whatever? It takes you like 2 or 3 rounds to move through like 2 doors or something like that, because all of the actions need to be broken up. The movement doesn't carry over, right? It can get, it's almost like there's too much, you know, fiddliness. And, you know, when it came to things like equipment and what you had equipped and what you can use, it was like, yes, it got to be a little bit too much. And the fact of the matter is the combats were not long enough and actions were far too precious for people to really be spending time. And so you used to see stuff all the time, stuff that intrinsically bothered me, even though I understood why players were doing it, where like you're fighting and they'll be like, I'm in the middle of a life or death fight. And it's like, oh, I have my thing. I throw my sword to the ground. I throw my bow to the ground. It's like, nobody does that, right? Like, you don't throw your weapons to the ground when you're fighting. Like, I mean, maybe if you get like disarmed or you get thrown back or something like that. But like the idea that it's more action efficient for me to just throw my weapon on the ground, it just doesn't feel like with what we would expect to see in movies or in, you know, media or even in probably real life. Not that I've ever fought with a sword, but so yeah, I like the swap change. You know, they added reposition. Great little change there. So one change, which I just found out about, which I thought was pretty cool, is because I always wondered that myself. I was like, hey, if you need a free hand in order to trip and your hand is agile, how come the trip isn't agile? But now it is. So if you're using an athletics action and you're using your hand, then that hand is only -4 multiple attack penalty, not -5. The disarm change was literally exactly what I had said over a year ago. I said, hey, trip is -2 to attack and -2 and off guard, and they have to spend an action to get rid of it. So at the very least, disarm should be somewhere in that same ballpark, you know, where they have to spend an action to get rid of it. And that's exactly what they did. And I actually thought it was a pretty, I thought it was a pretty cool change. I actually really liked that. So they fixed hammers and flails, which is good. You know, so there was some change, but at the same time, slow, no change. Wall of stone, no change. And again, maybe this is just me. Again, I've got an amazing, incredible Patreon community of really, really dedicated Pathfinder 2 players, many of whom are, yes, you know, fairly aggressive in the way that they play the game. You know, they come to win, right? They come to play. And, you know, if you look at conversations, if you look at what people are playing and how they're using, like these spells are ubiquitous. These spells are everywhere. They're probably, you know, arguably to the point where they push out other spells. So, and most cases when people list, like, what are your problematic spells? Here's this list: Wall of Stone, slow. I would even say synesthesia. And we didn't see any changes for them, except for synesthesia, which just didn't get republished. And so that brings actually to me to the thing that I think is going to cause the most lasting damage from this remaster is apparently, I mean, this is the word from, I guess, from Pathfinder Society. So take that for what you will. But my understanding is, unless something very specifically has like the same name, it's the same thing, but the rules got updated, you could take like anything that was in the old edition. And I just think that is rife with problems because, you know, take a spell like synesthesia. It's in your core rulebook. It wasn't explicitly banned. This isn't a new edition, but it's not in the book. Now, maybe they'll put it in core 2. I don't know. If they do put spells in core 2, I'm going to be really mad because now I have to look through 2 books of spells in order to find what my spell does, which is insane to me. So then you don't have a synesthesia. So the only synesthesia you have is from the core rulebook. So if you are a new player who comes to the game, you get into Pathfinder 2 2024, you go to your local store, you pick up the core rulebook, and you want to play, and you go, oh, I want access to this. These are all the spells I can take. Well, no, that's not. There's other spells that are in an older edition, I guess, of the game. It's not a new edition, though, that you can play with. Also, you can take feats from there. Also, you can, it's messy, right? Yeah, it's just very messy, you know? Damien, a little bit more critical than I am about it. But yeah, Nail, it just seems messy. And I think it's going to be very confusing. It's going to be confusing for me. It's going to be confusing. I got to imagine it's got to be confusing to new players. But it also sort of like, well, you know, I want to honor the design intent of the game. Did they not include synesthesia for a reason? Did they think it was too powerful? Did they just forget to add it? Did they think nobody took it? You know, but they also didn't explicitly ban it. So what is it? It's in this weird sort of limbo space. And, you know, we've heard that Foundry, right, is just going to treat this as an errata. So does that mean that, you know, whenever they update the errata, that the synesthesia spell is going to get taken out of the compendium on Foundry because it's not in the core rulebook anymore? I don't know. Daniel says they just save for core 2. Maybe. I will say that they must be adding a lot of spells to core 2 though, because, you know, people like me and other people have really gone through the spell lists, and you know, there's not that many spells missing from core 1. Joseph, I don't disagree with you. You know, I guess it's just a question of how much can we expect. And again, maybe you know, maybe they will just print all these spells in core 2, in which case I'm also irritated because now half of the core spells in the game are in one book and half of the core spells of the game are in a different book. And Sanderson, that's a good point. They Secrets of Magic sort of is in this weird space. People are like, oh, hey, are the Magus and the Summoner going to get reprint in core? So it's possible that they do that. Hey, we had a super chat from Cyber. Says, some historical fighting treatises do actually recommend that sometimes. Dropping a spear to draw a dagger or short sword if an enemy grapples you, etc. Yeah, Cybersmith, I can buy that it happens from time to time. But the percentage, how frequent that occurs in a game of Pathfinder 2 is pretty hilarious. It's pretty funny. But Nobeer says, looking for spells in books in 2023 is objectively playing the game wrong. Well, that I am playing the game wrong, Nobeer. I know I'm a dinosaur. I like to look at, you know, but then why even print the books? Why even print the books? At this point, we should just accept it. They should just go full digital, you know? But yeah, again, hopefully we get those spells. But then again, that's just a little bit weird for me. Grim Prism, I complained about this the other day. I go, when you have something that's called core and there's more than one of them, it does make me kind of go, which one's the core? Well, they both are. There's core 1 and core 2. It's like, I just didn't like that name. But yeah, I would say overall, I give the remaster like a C plus, maybe a B minus. I think some of the mistakes that potentially got made, I think the structure of it was has some problems. I would have loved to see certain classes get brought down a peg, maybe, or at least maybe everything else risen up to a certain level. You know, some of the other classes I think could need the help. Rogue and Fighter did not need additional stuff, especially the Rogue. And we'll see. Maybe all these supposed mistakes are actually the way they intended the game to be perceived, in which case the Rogue is just like the goat of all goat. By the way, the Rogue is now the only class. Okay, even the Monk doesn't get this. The Rogue gets save specialization in Fortitude, in Will, and gets greater save specialization in Reflex. So yeah. So again, I'm mostly sure that is a mistake. So yeah, it's good enough. that I think for what they had to do and in the time frame that they had to do it and get everything reprinted, I guess I give them, good credit for that, good marks for that. But man, I just, I do feel like there's a couple of things that are potentially holding it back. Again, some of the classes I think should have had some more work. Some classes got a ton of changes, which was great. It's like, I'm being selfish here. I would have loved to see the kind of work that went into the cleric go into the ranger. And maybe even all the classes. Like if you're going to get in there has to have been feats or abilities that you just went, this just wasn't really pulling its weight, or, this was just a little too, too good. Maybe we need to pull that back a little bit. I would have liked to see that. Sean, it says, what do you think of them removing Eldritch Trickster from the rogue? Yeah, so they did remove the rogue Eldritch Trickster class, whatever it's called, Thief Racket. They removed all the feats that reference magic. So I don't know. I don't know if they felt like maybe the free archetypes solve this issue, or not free archetypes, but archetypes. Maybe you can just be a caster, archetype. But yeah, they evidently, it's weird, right? So the ranger, right, they made warden spells part of the core class, right? I mean, technically they always were, but now warden spells are a feat that you can take straight up, and you're so in a weird way they made the ranger almost kind of more magical, but they took that from the rogue and they got rid of all the rogue's magic. So I feel like Bruno's right. I feel like Eldritch Trickster could be an archetype. So I think that personally makes more sense to me. Then again, you're talking to the wrong guy. I think almost everything in the game should just be an archetype. So I'm the one who obviously doesn't want to say this. By the way, for the people talking about the spells in Core 2, remember, it's my understanding that Core 2 is also going to contain all the lists of archetypes, supposedly. So that means that Core 2 has to fit in 8 classes. So unless they're not putting any rules in Core 2, which would kind of be weird, I don't know. I mean, the structure of Player Core 2 is going to be really, really strange. It's possible Player Core 2 doesn't contain any rules. It only contains classes, archetypes, and maybe spells. But that book is going to be really, really strange how that's made. So yes, rules lawyer confirming, yes, more than 40 archetypes. So, they got to put in, if they have a big list of spells and they have 8 classes and they have 40 archetypes, that's a lot of page count, unless they're like going to remove all the rules, which will be a really interesting, weird book to look at. So it will contain, I'm not disagreeing that the book will contain spells. What I'm saying is it going to contain, like, here's some extra spells to have fun that really fit the flavor of these classes, including, obviously it includes a sorcerer. So obviously it's going to have to include the sorcerer focus spells. So obviously it's going to include focus, or spells. I just meant, is every spell that we saw in Core Rulebook that is no longer in Core 1 going to be in Core 2? I don't know. So yeah, someone asked what was my favorite change and what was my least favorite change. By the way, Cybersmith is losing his mind that they removed the Eldritch Trickster. Yeah. What are my favorite and least favorite changes? My favorite changes are probably to the War Priest. I think those cleric feats are really cool. I think the Revitalizing Strike, is a really fun feat. I really like, how they structured it. I love the raise a symbol feat, which is probably one of the better feats in the game, if we're being honest with ourselves. I think being a war priest before felt like you just, it didn't feel like you were, it just felt like you were a cleric who also sometimes had a shield, or maybe but it never felt like you were combining the two in any meaningful way, except for smiting. And I think this, to me, is more what I think of when I think of like the sort of, and again, this is my 4E bias coming in. So I really liked the strength-based cleric from 4th edition, and the war priest I think got it. And of course, obviously, they get master at 19. I would have loved to see them get master at 15. That would have been totally fine to me, because, you know, they got expert 2 levels later after everybody else gets expert. They can get master 2 levels later after everybody else gets that. I would have preferred that. They didn't do that, whatever. So I really liked the War Priest changes. I really did. In terms of what my least favorite change is the lack of change in the Ranger. I mean, I think the Ranger is just, I think it's potentially becoming for me, the most like uninspired class, especially martial class. So I think that probably is like, I know it's not really a change, but I would have, like, as much as I loved what they did with the cleric, I was disappointed at just absolutely how little they did to the Ranger. And I felt like the Ranger could have used that love as well. I still feel like their action economy is really messed up because of the requirement to hunt prey, potentially multiple times per fight. And I just don't like that. Basically, the class doesn't function unless you do have a hunt prey, because your hunted shot doesn't work, your twin takedown doesn't work, your disrupt prey doesn't work, right? Monster hunter doesn't work. None of that stuff works unless you hunt prey. So you might as well just say, hey, like, think of this functionally, and this isn't 100% true, but functionally, the Ranger is slowed 1. And when the Ranger is slowed 1, they get to use their class features. That is kind of what the Ranger is. Now, as a bonus to you, you get to attack twice as 1 action with a very set of specific circumstances. But would you trade that for slow 1 permanently? No. And yeah, I know you're not hunting prey literally every round, but I am being over exaggerating there. But my point is this, like, it's a lot of actions to give up, and I would have liked to see them change more. Again, for me, being a tactical game, which Pathfinder 2 is, for me, it's about creating interesting decisions in the context of the fight and in the context of your combat round, right? So to me, a game is tactical when you take different actions over the course of a combat because of different foes, because of different terrain. If you're not doing that, if you're just using the same abilities over and over and over again in every single fight, I think that is bad for a tactical game. I'm not going to say, that I'm not going to call it out specifically, but I'll use rogue as an example. If you're a rogue who has, let's say, gang up, opportune backstab, and preparation, your turns are going to look very similar because that is really, really effective. And it kind of doesn't matter what you're fighting or how you're fighting it. You're going to be like, look, I want to be in melee. I want to make a sneak attack. I want my allies to hit it. And I want to take my reactions to make 0 map attack sneak attacks. Until the creature's dead, rinse, repeat. Obviously, no combat is ever that simple. But I find that, like, when you have to make different tactical decisions based on the changes of the game, that's where the game becomes more interesting. Now, down to your round, I think it's interesting when, as a player, your choice between do I do X or do I do Y is a compelling choice. And of course, the game is replete with those. Do I target this creature or that creature? It's a valid, interesting choice. But for a Ranger, the choice to hunt prey isn't a choice. It's a non-choice. Yes, of course, they are not physically forced to hunt prey, but that's not what you came here to do, right? You came here to use that. And so if you're going to use that, if you're going to have hunt prey, I think the effect of it should be far more powerful. And I talked about this on RFC stream, but whether it's more powerful abilities or giving you some sort of reward or benefit when your fallen prey falls or when your chosen prey falls or something, again, make it more of an interesting choice than just being this sort of automatic reaction. Let's see, what else do we got here? Does Core 1 not include the multi-class archetypes of the classes it contains? Great question. I don't know. Let's take a look here. Dedication. Yep, it does. It has 8 dedications for the multi-class and no others. So it's got from Bard to Cleric to Wizard to Witch. So there you go. That's the answer. let's see here. Just looking at the chat here. Cyberspace, this is a change I like. This is a home rule, house rule that we have been using pretty much the entire time we have played Pathfinder 2, which is we let shields be whatever they are and sturdy. You know, we just let you pay the difference and make your shield sturdy. I think that is a no-brainer. And I was very happy to see them make that change. So that's a great change, good change. So yeah, definitely like what they did with the shield rules for sure. Shields, like even in my game with Rise of the Runelords, Nick was a champion of Escanor, was a champion, and he had his shield. And of course, he had shield ally, and shield ally raised the hit points, right, of the shield, but it also raised the break threshold, which I never liked, because I'm like, no, if it gets more hit points, but the break threshold goes up by the same amount, you haven't really done much, because the shield is still just going to break at half as much. You've basically increased it as half as much. So I actually left the break threshold the same, and I gave it more hit points. So basically, like, your shield could legitimately take more beatings and longer beatings. So I liked the shield block. I think it feels very powerful. It feels fun. It's a good feel good mechanic for sure. And to be clear, an interesting one. You know, this is shield block, raising a shield. Like, it's like the complete opposite of hunt prey. It's actually a legitimately interesting decision. Cybersmith says, did it get easier to hunt prey before battle? No, the rule for hunt prey is the same as it was in original core, which is if you are tracking your foe, you can hunt prey before you see them. Otherwise, you have to see them. So again, I don't know how often people are doing that. Maybe that is something that I have just been sleeping on. But you know, in most adventures, I don't feel like characters are usually, when they're going through the, whatever adventure site that the adventurer has thrown them into, they're not usually specifically hunting down their one prey. But yes. But yeah, otherwise it's, if you see, or you can hear your foe, then you can hunt the prey. So, I mean, again, I think that is the same as it was in core rulebook. So, which is fine, which is great. I mean, again, if this is where things get a little wonky. So like some people have a real problem with the characters doing anything before a fight, right? So like if your ranger, right, was standing outside of a door before every fight and just listening, and you let them hunt prey, as an action, but before initiative is rolled, so now they're hunting them. If you allow them to do that, I guess that could make your ranger significantly stronger. But I also know that there's a lot of GMs out there who, the moment anybody tries to take any sort of action, like hunt prey or casting a spell or doing anything, they call for initiative roll. So there's sort of a weird give and take area there. Certainly, if you're able to enter every fight with a, hunt prey up, I think that's to your advantage for sure. So in any case, no, AV is not a good place for ranged characters. You're going to be fighting through cover a lot. You're going to have problems with line of sight. It's a pretty densely packed dungeon. Yeah, no, again, I absolutely agree to those, I absolutely agree that you could, track from footprints, scorch marks, etc. So Rules Lawyer says, boo to those GMs. I want my rangers examining scat. So I will give you an example of something that I kind of poo-pooed. For those of you who don't know, Knights of Last Call runs a mega campaign called Northern Reaches. It's kind of like a multi-GM, multiplayer campaign, but it's not like everybody doing their own thing. There's like one governing body of game masters who sort of combine everybody's stories, and it's like one continual thread. So it really is just like a gigantic single campaign, just with multiple GMs. Anyways, one of the more popular builds that has come up was the Investigator, especially last season, every year is a different season. You start with a new character, and there's new challenges, and there's a new thing. And then at the end of the season, all the characters retired. We started a new season at the beginning of the year. Anyways, Investigator was really popular because people were investigators, psychic archetype investigator with Eldritch Archer, because that way you could use your devise a stratagem to know if you were going to crit or not, and then you could use that as your 3-action Eldritch shot with an amped imaginary weapon, which just does an absurd amount of damage. So it's a very, very high damage thing with a very, very low chance of wasting your turn or failing your turn. In any case, in order to devise a stratagem, you have to be pursuing a lead. And, pursuing a lead says you spend 1 minute examining the details of a potential clue, designating the subject related to the clue as the target of your investigation. This subject is typically a single creature, item, or small location, but it might allow you GM might allow you a different scope. You don't need to know the identity, the purpose, the nature of the subject, but you do need to be aware of its existence. So in my mind, the mental image of this, it's 1 minute, is when an investigator goes to pursue a lead, right? That's that scene in every single mystery show where the detective is, looking over through the room, picking up the pen, looking at, it's like a monk, a show like Monk or Psych, where the camera zooms in, shoom, on the pen, and you see the hint of the outline of the lipstick, like they're putting these things together, and they're sort of just literally, looking at the clues and sort of building it in. But because it says 1 minute and you just need to be aware of its existence, what happened in Northern Reaches a lot is the investigators would just spend 1 minute outside the door of a room. And they would listen to somebody in there, and they would say, I am pursuing my lead against him. And I go, what? You didn't do anything. But rules as written, they could, because you didn't even have to be aware of it. You just had to be aware of its existence. And that's enough for you to pursue a lead. So for me, I thought that was a little janky, but everybody else apparently thought it was quite all right. So again, I think that's where, how your GM rules that is going to really have a big impact on that. Monk stances are annoying in that regard. They can't be, they can't use them outside of combat, right? Like if a ranger is going to go up to the door, right? And again, this is all fine. Like it all depends on what you want to do with your Pathfinder 2 game. But if a ranger wants to go up to the door and listen, for the sound of the bugbear, the voice, he hears the goblins talking to each other in excited voices. And then he hears one voice rise above the din. It's an ogre. And the ranger goes, my senses, dial in, and I'm going to hunt that prey. All right, cool. But then, and this is all before initiative is rolling, but then is it fine if the barbarian rages, charges at the door, kicks it in, and starts initiative already raging? Some of you may say yes. Some of you may say no. Again, you're looking at a guy who, with my group, and when I was a player, my GM, Aaron, would do the same thing. We would typically let spellcasters even cast spells as the fight was starting. Not like a fireball spell, but like a haste spell or a heroism spell or a buff spell, a bless spell. And that was like the action we were taking in order to initiate combat. So we would like get to roll with like our arcana for initiative and stuff, or our religion for initiative. So again, very loose interpretation about what is that distinction between, encounter mode and exploration mode. If you are letting characters like the monk or the barbarian or the ranger hunt, prey, rage, or go into a stance outside of encounter mode, then those classes do get a lot of a significant advantage. So, yes, a monk, a show about an investigator. Psych, a show about an investigator. Medium, a show about an investigator. Is the fighter still better than I generally allow it? And Pepper, that's our reasoning exactly. We're like, none of these things are broken. Like, I want my wizard to cast haste on somebody before the fight starts, right? Like, I want my cleric to cast bless and still get to do fun, cool stuff. Yeah. And like you said, they're still not going to do as much damage as the fighter. So what does it even matter? But yeah. So anyways, I think that overall, I don't know. I think it's pretty good. Like I said, C plus, B minus. I thought there were many more changes that I thought were good than there were changes. I didn't really even think that there were that many bad changes. Like the reposition, fine. Agile for the thing, fine. DC from 20 to 15 on aid, great. Sturdy rune for shields, awesome. Better cleric feats, fantastic, right? Like the witch changes, I think, are pretty great. Because I think all of the hex cantrips, I think all of them used to have that, once you got hit with it, you were immune for a minute to it. And I think all of the hex cantrips lost that, which is just great. I love hexes. I think that's what the witches should have sort of dived into. The evil eye cantrip, which ironically is what the which is what the resentment gets, which is the witch that obviously has the the insane familiar ability here. They get evil eye, and the evil eye cantrip now makes you sickened instead of frightened. So that is insane. Although I'm curious here. So evil eye is very strong now. Although this is interesting. So this is the question I have. Okay. If we look at the evil eye cantrip, the evil eye used to make you frightened. Okay. So everybody knows. So here's what I want to know. Maybe you all are smarter people than me. All right. If we take a look at evil eye in the new player's core, evil eye is a 1-action cantrip, hex, range of 30 feet, target 1 creature, defense will duration sustained up to 1 minute. The target becomes sickened 1 if it fails a will save. This condition can't be reduced below 1 while the spell is active and you can see the target. Now, does this mean, because my understanding of the sickened condition is that you can cure the sickened condition through retching. So it says it can't be reduced below 1 while the spell is active. So if the spell is no longer active, if the witch stops sustaining the evil eye, is the target no longer sickened 1? Or do they still need to retch to clear the sickened 1, right? Because the spell used to be frighten, and frighten automatically has a way that it goes away, right? It just bleeds off. But pretty sure sicken doesn't just go away. I think you still need to retch. So in which case Rules Lawyer says, let them retch, resentment OP. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm all for the witch having this really exciting play style with the resentment. It's just like, oh man, it's kind of sad that it overshadows some of these other, and I don't know how many people are, I mean, obviously a lot of people play witch because they want the flavor, and which is totally respectable. And some of these other patrons are really, really cool. But man, like that is a pretty powerful patron. Not only do you get this familiar of Dark Dreams or whatever it's called here, but you get this really, really, really good cantrip that just does a lot of work. But yeah, so yeah, getting sickened instead of frightened is great. By the way, just a lot of things are immune to frightened. A lot of things are immune to mental effects. So not many things are immune to sicken. So sicken is just fantastic. And it looks like the chat here is saying that they still need to retch. So Shadow Solomon and Car Guy Nick all says that they need to retch. That's Daniel's understanding as well. It's Grim Prisms. It's pretty crazy. So that is fantastic. That's a lot of, so let's see here. The one that gives a boost to AC is good if you don't want to be completely busted. Yeah. So what Damien here is talking about is the, is it the, no, not the inscribed one. I don't know which one it was, Damien. There's definitely one that gives you. The Resentment, Silence and Snow, Spinner of Threads. Oh, there, yes. Familiar of Balanced Luck. Whenever you cast or sustain a hex, one creature within 15 feet gets either a +1 status bonus to its AC or a -1 status penalty to its AC until the start of your turn. No save. So that is the Spinner of Threads. Fantastic. That is a great one. Yeah. And Nudge Fate no longer needs to be sustained to be able to keep it up. So again, overall, witches, I mean, again, pretty good. I do think that the Resentment's a little too strong, but that's okay. Cybersmith said, is there anything you're hoping for in Players Core 2 or in Game Master Core? Well, Game Master Core is also out, Cybersmith. They removed a lot of the fluff from Game Master Core. They removed the NPC codex. They moved the items into Game Master Core. What am I hoping for in Player Core 2? That's a great question. Well, obviously, I would love to see that, I'd love to see the Barbarian get better because I think the Barbarian needs some love as well. Again, I think the Barbarian should be the indisputable damage dealer in the game, and I don't think it is. And I think that a lot of the Barbarians a lot of times end up feeling a little bit like a glass cannon, and I just don't think that's what Barbarians should feel like. So Barbarian, I think, is one of the classes that I think needs the absolute most help, that I would say, from my perspective. Let me think about that. I'd love to see a complete rebuild of how we're going to see, I hope, a complete rebuild of the champion because they're getting rid of alignment. And that's one of the reasons that's why it's in Player Core 2. And I'm here for it. Champions had a lot of problems with their feat trees. They had so many restrictions on their different abilities. And there were so many feats that they couldn't take. There were more feats at many levels as a champion that you could not take than you could take. So I'd love to see the champion get, taken a closer look at. I'm pretty good with the monk. I mean, they can clean up a couple things, but I think the monk is fine. Obviously I have certain feelings about the Oracle and the Alchemist. I have come around a little bit and believe, I even said this on my class tier list. The Alchemist I still think is pretty weak at low levels, but at higher levels, the Alchemist does do some pretty cool stuff. But I still think the Oracle most of the time is just a bad sorcerer. And so I would like to see the Oracle get some, cleric level love. So, I mean, again, if you're going to have all these classes in the game, they should all be like legitimately, compelling and interesting, which is, and again, people will choose classes just for flavor, and that's totally fine. But, that's not your job. Your job isn't to necessarily make something that's, flavorful. Your job is to make something that works, and people will provide the flavor, I think that's my key. Let's see. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Thicken from the Witch, very powerful. People can't use potions. Not the worst thing in the world, but, the fighters just can't ignore it. It's really, really good. Yeah. Rules Lawyer says, oh no, I see that it can't Sicken be lowered to 0 during duration. So yeah, Sicken doesn't go away on its own. No. Yeah. It's really powerful. Really powerful. Could you go, is there a rule that you can't cast multiple hexes a turn? Could I go like Evil Eye, Evil Eye, Evil Eye? Maybe I can. I don't know. That's wink, wink, wink. That's pretty good. Self-confessed cynic says resentment is too strong. Naysayers are crazy. Wait. Are you trying to say that it's too strong and it should be left that way? Or are you trying to say it's too strong and people are crazy if they think it should be left that way? Okay. I'm curious. Quagmire says, I can't wait to see what they do with the Oracle. One of my favorite classes, but it is weak. Yeah, the flavor of the Oracle is fantastic. And I won't deny that. I think the whole idea of it is really, really compelling. I just think that they need to just deliver on it a little bit stronger, a little bit more. So yeah, the Oracle Curse should be more interesting as a trade-off. Again, make it this kind of real back and forth. I mean, I understand what they're afraid of. They're afraid that people are going to, minimize the downsides and maximize the upsides. But I see the Oracle as like the ultimate example of like the burn bright, but not for long, right? Like I want that as an Oracle character. You're that classic character archetype that like has too much power within them, that your struggle is to control it, not to find it. Like you already have the power. It's just a question of, will it consume you before you're able to achieve your goal? And I would love to just see the Oracles be able to like, like if you've ever seen like an X-Men movie where there's like 3 instances of this where like the Phoenix Force is allowed to sort of erupt from Jean Grey, and it's more of like it's a letting go. It's devastating. It's potentially, completely corrupted. And it's destroyed. So yeah. I that's what I want the Oracle to feel like. That's what I want the Oracle to feel like. I want the Oracle to feel like Jean Grey with the Phoenix Force. That's what I want an Oracle to feel like. Jim Bob, this isn't actually Jim Bob. I completely forgot about this. I love this change. I know Mark Seifter feels like this is probably too powerful, but I hated the old focus rules. I love these new focus rules so much. They are, number one, much more clear, much more to the point. The focus rules, the focus points to me were such a cool mechanic because they basically said, look, you don't have to worry about tracking these spell slots. Like these are your encounter powers, to use a 4th edition term. These are your encounter powers. You can use your focus points to get them back. But it was weird because you could be like, well, you have 3 focus points, but if you ever spend more than 2, you can only get back 1. And then you do have to track how many you have and how many you spent in the last fight. And it was just like, whoa, it's horrible. I hated that rule. I'm so happy that they are using this new rule. I am a 100% on board with the new focus point rules. It feels better. I think it's going to make people more interested in using focus points. And I'm even here to have focus spells be stronger. I think that to me is an area of the game. I would love, I know everyone loves Vancian castings. Like I think like Summoner and Magus are a little too far. They're a little bit too light on the spell slots, but I would love to see them cut back massively on the number of spell slots that are available to some of the classes, like the Wizard and the Sorcerer and the Cleric, just to a much more manageable level, especially the prepared casters. And I'd like to see them make up the difference with focus points and cantrips, and really get to the point where focus spells and cantrips are sort of your go-to things that you use, say, in combat, and that your slotted spells are really reserved for sort of individually powerful, kind of maybe situational or niche things that might come up outside of combat or might come up in combat, but as a specific answer to a very specific threat, and go from having, Sorcerer has 40 spells at the end of the game, or like 38 or something. Like, I just think that's way too many slots to measure from, and all the way from level 1 all the way up to level 10. It's just too much. I think by the time you get to level, 9 or 10, and you've got rank 5 or rank 6 spells at 11, I already start to feel like, what am I doing with all these things here? I don't need all of these. So I would fundamentally, but again, would I have loved to see that? Yes. Are they going to do that in what they are calling an errata plus? No, of course not. But that is how I would do it. Again, when they first came out, I was really, I really crapped on wave casters because I thought it was way too few spells. And while I still think it is way too few spells, I think that is a better direction to go than the opposite, actually. So I think they've kind of sold me on that. I've always been sort of moving away from Vancian castings, but Pathfinder 2 really, really sold me on moving further away from it. So that good on you. Good on you, Pathfinder 2. Let's see here. Do I think the Oracle will get sanctification in some subclasses? Maybe the divine ones. Yeah, possibly. I don't think that's out of the question. So focus points now require up to 30 minutes to get back feeds into the point I've made before. Time is the major resource. Yes and no. I would say yes and no. I mean, there are technically feats that give you back all 3 focus points after 10 minutes, but the number of times where you have 10 minutes but not 30 minutes is going to be fairly low. There might be times where you have no minutes, which is fine, but that's really more of the same encounter, really. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of groups usually are going to have at least, 10 to 20, 30 minutes between fights. Having to rely on cantrips feels lame as a caster. Having more reliable. So, what's interesting to me about this? If you're a fighter or you're a rogue or you're a ranger, you know what you are going to do for 20 levels? You're going to attack with your sword or your short sword or your gnomish flick mace or your bow and arrow. And that is pretty much all you are going to do for 20 levels. While I agree that spellcasters should absolutely have cool, fun tricks up their sleeve, I don't think that, why can't my character rely on, my lightning blast power or my flame gout power that is just at will, and I can use it again and again and again and again. I don't think that is actually that bad of a thing. The focus changes mean my Magus Psychic can now go Nova every combat. I'm so pumped. Yeah, the Magus and the Summoner and the Psychic really got a nice improvement here, for sure. You're going to be amping a lot. So that's really, really cool. Let's see. Ian says, Rogue moving away from casting is nice. We've left the era of having non-magical characters, and Barbarian, Fighter, Rogue are like the last remaining mundane martials. Ian, this is a little bit of a side tangent, but I do want to say something here. Especially in game systems like Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons, where magic is not particularly rare, nor is it particularly costly or demanding. There are many systems where, books, movies, worlds, where magic is dangerous, deadly, risky. It draws upon the life force of the user or the cosmos, and, everything is in balance. And if you take a life, if you save a life, you must take a life, right? Or it requires some weird and exacting rituals and disciplines. Or it's, controlled by genetic fate, no matter how much you try or practice, if you're in the Wheel of Time, you're not going to be a channeler unless you were born a channeler. So magic is fairly ubiquitous in these sort of modern D20 games, which means that the thing that you need to think about magic is magic is like technology. And just like in a sci-fi show or a sci-fi movie, you might have the character who is definitely the nerdy engineer gearhead type, but that is like specifically very good with tech, very good with computers, very good at hacking, and they have their net deck or whatever. But every character is going to use technology. Even the fighter is going to use technology. They're just going to use it in a way that benefits their particular style. It's like the distinction between somebody who builds cars and somebody who races cars. Just because you're a really good person who races cars doesn't necessarily mean that you really know how to build one, but you're very good at using and utilizing the tech. I find it strange that these characters don't actually lean more into the magic. I think the idea of having a completely non-magical class actually feels very strange in a world where magic is so ubiquitous and so everywhere. But yeah, so and that's interesting. Corel says, I think 2 spells per level would be fine. I think so too. I'm also maybe okay with lower level spells dropping off and just sort of keeping a wedge of maybe the last 3 or 4 levels of spells. So it's like, oh, I've got level 7, level 6, level 5, level 4. And, that's fine. I think that'd be fine. And maybe for level 4, you get like, 4 or 5 slots, and you can just take stuff and heighten stuff and put them in that level or something. Obviously, this would involve changing some of the structures of the game, but I think that would be fine. But yeah. Goblin says, cleric and wizard focus spells are all mid. I do agree with that. But I think that's because they get so many other spell slot spells. Like it creates this weird tension, right? Where, it doesn't matter what spells you have in combat in Pathfinder 2, you still only get 3 actions. And let's be clear here. Most of the time it's going to be a spell, and most of the time it's going to be a 2-action spell. So that means that you have to make a choice between using a spell slot, using a focus spell, using a spell slot spell, using a focus point spell, using a cantrip. They all are mostly going to take 2 actions. And generally speaking, weak, stronger, strongest. And once you have so many slots that you're not really worried about running out, there's really very little reason or incentive if you're a wizard or a cleric or a sorcerer to use your focus spells. That's the problem. That's the issue I have, is that there's a clear power delineation, and you have so much of this supposedly limited daily resource. At the end of the day, it doesn't really feel, I don't know about all of you. I don't know if you guys are casting 7 or 8 spells of combat and you're having 5 or 6 combats a day, but it is pretty much the case that, like, and again, I've played a cleric, I've played a sorcerer, Bob has played a sorcerer, Aaron's playing a sorcerer right now. We had somebody play, I don't even know what. Long story short, once we got past, level 5 or so. Aaron had a cleric in Quest for the Frozen Flame. Once we got past like level 5 or so, level 7, like nobody ever really ran out of slots, So it didn't really feel like a resource. It felt more of like kind of like a pain in the ass. But my point is that, yeah, like the focus spells can't be more powerful than the spell slot, right? I think we can all generally agree to that. But then the spell slot is supposed to be this limited resource. So it's like, oh yeah, it is stronger, but you only have so many. Well, no, actually you got a shitload. So it's kind of okay. And that's where it gets kind of like, wonky. And obviously you're still going to be limited to only 2 or 3 or 4 of your maximum highest level slot. But, that's still 8 in your highest 2 slots. That's a lot of spells. It's a lot of spells. Yeah, it's drought early on, bloat later. I would much rather you start with more slots. In fact, like, Jim Bob, this is sort of like a general criticism I have of all role-playing games. This is very true of 4th edition D&D, which is role-playing games today are still designed. I'm talking about the core release. I'm not talking about the beginner box. I'm talking about the core release of the book. The core release of the book is still released and is still written, and the system, in my opinion, is still designed as if you are playing this game for the very first time. And I hate that. Like in 4th edition D&D, for example, there's 30 levels, but you end up with getting 4 encounter powers and 4 daily powers. But at a certain point, you start with only 1 and 1. You start with 1 encounter, 1 daily, and then they build up to 4, and then it never gets higher than 4. It stays at 4 for the rest of the game. You just swap out old powers for the new hotness, which is cool, which is great. But it's like the early levels are kind of boring, and there's no reason mechanically why you couldn't have 4 encounter powers and 4 daily powers at low level. The reason they don't do it is because it's low level, and we don't want to overwhelm the new player. Okay, this game is 4 years old. We're not beginners anymore. I get that is what the beginner box product is for. Make the simple version of the game over there. Make the level 1 character that only has 2 spells, that only has electric arc and sleep, But for all the rest of us, why does level 1 have to be this or the first couple of levels have to be like this punishment level? I don't get, just give me the complexity of the game. Make the game interesting right from the get-go. There's no reason why it needs to be this way. And I still feel like these games are designed to be like, they care more about the person who's picking up the game for the first time than they care about the person who's been playing it for 4 levels. So I have that kind of issue with this. Let's see here. But anyways, can we talk about the dying was brutally deadly since day one and many people were house ruling it without knowing? Well, Luke, we did an entire stream last week on death and dying. I'll say this. I don't care how you feel about the rule. I will say this, what shocks me, what is incredibly amazing to me, is that somehow, for the last 4 years, a reasonable percentage of us were playing a very, very different, dare I say, critical rule differently than the other significant percentage of us. And somehow nobody ever caught that. Like, there are threads, there are things. Is Pathfinder 2 too deadly? Is Pathfinder 2 too hard? And nobody ever, the core rulebook had 4 printings of errata, I think. I think there were 4 erratas issued for core rulebook. This never got addressed, ever. It's very strange to me. That's what's crazy to me. It's almost like a Mandela effect, right? Where it's like, is it really, did it always say that? Is it possible that we really just did not know that half of us were playing it wrong? It's really crazy. I don't know who Eric is, but he is my new hero. So that's pretty sweet. Drinking wine with your dog is just got to be one of the top 10 experiences of a life. I love my dogs so very much. They so cute. Attacking with weapons over and over and over again is fun. Okay, shouldn't blasting people apart with lightning and fire be fun as well too? A weird thing that annoys me is there's no dedicated, prepared occult caster. And this should have been the witch. Every other tradition has one. I agree. I think the witch should only be occult. And I think it should, the wizard should be the arcane prepared. The druid should be the primal prepared. The brain fart cleric should be the divine prepared. And the witch should be the occult prepared. Full stop. And I think I would be fine with that. So I completely agree with that. Actually, 100%. I mean, is that useless and needless symmetry? No. Well, okay, maybe it is. But more important than that, it's like it's a witch. How is a witch not a culty? Of course a witch is a culty. The problem is the occult spell list. I mean, I love it. It's a fantastic list. I actually go on record as saying I think it's the second strongest tradition in the game, even though other people say it's primal. Agree to disagree. I think the occult, but what I don't like about the occult list is it is kind of weird and all over the place, and it just randomly has these tentacles of death monsters, and then it has weird psychic emanation stuff, and then it also has bardic music songs in it. It's a very weird list because it's trying to serve a bunch of different natures, All right, but yeah. I guess, like you say like occult and nature. I just don't see witches as casting fireball. That might just be my personal bias. But that, I lightning bolt, chain lightning just doesn't feel very witchy to me. But again, I mean, I guess it depends on what you think, especially when the witch has all these like hex and cackle and familiar, like, you're getting the definite occult vibe there, even if you're not using those things. So let's see here. I don't want to make sure I don't miss anything. Final super chat before I go to bed. The issue with making focus points based classes who can do more with focus points than others is that archetypes and items assume one focus point is roughly equal useful for all characters. That is true. And I think that is what Mark is afraid of. I think, or what Mark Seifter is sort of relying, saying specifically about it. And I do think you are correct. I think that there are classes that can do more with focus points than others, particularly some of the classes that start with 2 focus points, cough, cough, psychic, and being able to get those points back faster, sooner, and many more times per day is absolutely a significant buff for those character classes. So I keep an eye on your, maybe it's if you were thinking about making that kineticist, and you should, because that class is bonkers. The class is bonkers. Then, but maybe if you want to try your psychic out, now's the time, or Magus, I think as well. Let's see. Let's see here. Okay. Vin just misses the Tome of Battle. Yes, at the end of the day, all these spells and all these focus things, it all comes down to action economy. Absolutely not. Do I think 5e handled it better with fewer spells per spell level as you get higher? So I played a Bard in 5th edition from level 1 to 20. And I liked the spell system, and I was simultaneously frustrated with the spell system. I definitely felt it was easier. There's no doubt that it was easier to just say, okay, I know this many spells. I have this many slots. I can cast those spells at any of these slots. But I still don't think it was great. I mean, I just think there's fundamental issues with the Vancian issue. I mean, in a weird way, in 5th edition, I felt frustrated because I was like, I have access to these spells and I can't use them. This is, not to go off on a tangent, but this is the reason why I like Fabula Ultima's spellcasting system so much. You have a very limited number of, what we would today call spells, defined, precise mechanical effects that, generally speaking, are pretty broad in, ranging. This is a fire spell. It does fire damage to a bunch of creatures. This is a protection spell. It raises the defense of several of your allies. This is a healing spell. It heals this many hit points to this many of your allies, right? Very defined mechanical effects. And then for everything else, they have a completely free-form bullshit, make it up ritual system that has sort of an associated skill check and MP cost, and you and your GM can work together to sort of set a tone for your game. If your game is really high magic and your game has a lot of crazy over the top stuff, then yeah, absolutely. Your elementalist is, using very well balanced with the fighter sword swings, fire blasts in combat. But then out of combat, yeah, your character can combat, summon the spirits of the mountain and open up a new rift, part the Red Sea, if you will, and go through it. I don't need there to be a part the Red Sea spell. And I definitely don't need there to be a defined ritual in the book that says this spell is called the part the Red Sea ritual. And I don't need that. What I need is just a ritual system that says, hey, you're an elementalist. You can control the primal forces of fire and earth and water and air. And you and your GM can make something up that feels in line with that and give it a DC, give it a cost in MP, and go to town on that. And I think that is the better way of handling it. So yes, I thought 5e system was fine. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. So, now Jim Bob says unique spell lists that give caster classes unique identity. They specifically wanted to get away from that in Pathfinder 2, Jim Bob. Specifically because of one of the changes they made, one of the buffs to the rogue, right, is that the rogue used to have, they are proficient with all simple weapons, cool, and this limited handful of rogue weapons, very specifically these rogue weapons, 7 or 8 of them. The problem is that doesn't future-proof your class. So when a new weapon comes out that is not simple, it's martial, but it's definitely a rogue weapon, then the rogue doesn't get access to it. And it feels really, really weird. So this is a lot easier for them because this way they can come out with a bunch of new spells. And instead of saying, oh, and we have to add it to all 9 classes that have access to this, we can just say, this is part of the occult tradition. This is part of the arcane tradition. And it gets retroactively, automatically added into the, choice lists of all of those classes, which is, fine. So I think that is it may not be like the best, maybe it's not the most thematic or interesting decision, but it is absolutely a fantastic decision from like a game system management point of view, for sure. Let's see here. I mean, Kineticists really have changed the game. I mean, we've been playing now the last couple of weeks with the Kineticist in our Abomination Vault game. And every time they do something, I go, wow, that is crazy powerful. Wow, that is an AoE damage spell with a really high persistent bleed damage. And it's an AoE. And you can do that infinite times per day? What? What is even happening here? Oh, and you gained temporary hit points for casting it? What? That doesn't even make sense. I don't understand what's happening right now. It just seems crazy to me. But you know what? There we are. It is. That's what's happening. AoE, infinite AoE, high damage, high persistent damage, and I gain temporary hit points. Cool. Forever. Let's see here. Yeah, I agree, Casey. 100%. I agree with that. Level 1 and 2 are for level 1 and 2 players, not level 1 and 2 characters. I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, I know in 5th edition, it's pretty common for a lot of people to start off the game at level 3. I even think the experience point table in 5th edition is designed to quickly get you to level 3, which is where the real game begins. But that is definitely not at least it doesn't seem like that is the intention in Pathfinder 2. So, I think that, especially as a spellcaster, it's a lot more interesting when you have at least 2 full levels of spell slots, so at least have all your first and all your second. So it's like, for me, I guess I would maybe start at level 3 or 4 in Pathfinder 2 as well, I guess. Yeah. KC says the craziest thing to me was that Mark said he submitted an errata request early on and never got actioned. What the fuck is going on over there? That seems like a critical fix. I again, shocked, amazed that it did not get answered. I don't know how. Let's see. More stuff about the mags. All right. Fighters just attacking every level for 20 levels is boring and unfun. Cantrips are just that except forced onto casters. Kin gets it right because the powers are designed interestingly and they have depth. There could be no doubt that the Kineticist is absolutely an inspired design. I think it is absolutely by far the most fun Pathfinder 2 class. And I should actually say, I think it's fun. I think it's interesting. And I think it's powerful, and I think that is a kind of the trifecta of what you're looking for, right? We were having this conversation today on the Discord. By the way, if you're not a member of our Patreon and you want to be part of these conversations 24/7, because it's always going on, check us out, patreon.com/nicelastcall. We'd love to have you if you're cool and you don't mind getting into polite disagreements with other people. Because we don't always agree on everything. But you can make something powerful. This feat gives you +4 bonus to hit, untyped. Right? Yeah, that's very, very powerful. But it's not particularly interesting because it's not going to change really anything that you were doing before. Before, you were going to use your attack that did the most damage, and now you're going to use your attack that does the most damage. It's going to happen more often. And it's not particularly fun. I mean, I guess it's more fun to hit more often, but it doesn't inspire the imagination the way that, a kinetic wave of fire or somebody spinning their warhammer above their head and, striking several targets in a row does. It's powerful, but it's not fun and it's not interesting. So I think that when you can create something that is powerful, fun, and interesting, that is a huge win, I think, in the TTRPG space. So Kineticist really gets just A+ marks for me. And I think that it's fantastically done. So I agree completely with Vin here, because I do think fighters attacking every level for 20 levels is boring and unfun. And by the way, to be clear, yes, if you're double slicing, right, that is counting as basically just attacking. I mean, yes, I get it. You're making 2 strikes, but you're still striking a bunch and a ton. And I just don't think that is that. You're just doing damage and hoping for a crit. So another one from Vin, something like Kin, but with 4 to 12 wave slots could be a very interesting take on casters. Yeah, exactly. I think that number that Vin threw out here, 4 to 12 wave based slots, I think that feels right to me. That is the number. If you want to keep slots or daily resources or whatever for some unknown reason, that to me, I think, is a much more reasonable take on the progression. and then add on to that like the really compelling focus cantrip / kineticist way of interacting with things. So 100%. Evan finally made another live stream. Have I missed the dying rules chat? Well, Evan, we've talked about it a couple times throughout the course of this tonight, but we also did an entire video last week. If you check our live tab, not our video, we don't do that many videos. Most of our stuff is live streams. We did an entire 2.5 hours on death and dying, and we started with like a 30-minute chat on the dying rules. We could talk about it a little bit more, but I mean, long story short, it makes the game more deadly. I don't care what anybody says. It makes the game more deadly. There's no beating around the bush for that. I also find it incredibly amazing that somehow we all missed that, I mean, especially because, apparently Paizo thought that this was a rule the whole time. So when people were like, oh man, this encounter was really tough, a bunch of my characters died. It's like Paizo was designing it thinking that the game was harder than it was, and people were still having hard times with things. It's pretty crazy. But more so than that, I think it creates a problem where I know what they were trying to solve, right? They're trying to make it so that death is, how can I say this? They don't want the 5th edition problem, right? Where like getting knocked down multiple times isn't a big deal. The problem with it is that once you're knocked down in a fight, like in my personal opinion, you've already kind of paid the price, because you're going to either potentially miss your turn, or you're going to get your turn back because somebody has to heal you, which probably is not what they wanted to do either. And then you're going to have to spend action standing up and picking up your sword. So at the very least, you're probably going to spend 2 actions. But the biggest problem is the game rules already primed you to be in a bad spot. You're going to be up. You're going to have to take a bunch of action taxes to get back up into the fight. And you're at low hit points, right? Even if unless you got healing hands, max level heal from like a cleric, if you get a hit with a soothe spell or a battlefield medicine check, you might be up, but you might only be at, 10, 15, 20% of your hit points, which just makes you that much more likely to get taken out again. So you've already paid the price in actions. You've paid the price in risk, because you're much more likely to die again and get dropped again. I don't think you need to make the game punish you even more for being unconscious. I already think missing your turn is like the worst thing in the world in these games. And I'm not saying for me personally, I'm saying as the game master, if somebody sits down to play my game and they have to miss their turn, I'm like, or they only get 1 action to do something, like regardless of how realistic that is, I'm not here to punish my players. I got lucky. I rolled a critical hit. Their character got dropped. And guess what? You get to basically kind of sit out this fight. That's not something I'm interested in. That's not the kind of reward structure or punishment structure I want to create. I just don't think it fits with my, concept of what I want to do with the game. So all in all, I don't like the new dying rules. There could be no doubt. And yeah, absolutely, Evan. I mean, Pathfinder 2 kind of already solved this. Everybody starts with a hero point, and somehow everybody always spends their hero point on, there's a peasant's wagon that is stuck in the mud. There's an obstinate ox who won't listen. And the ranger runs over and goes, I make a nature check to coerce the ox to pull the wagon. And, the fighter runs over and goes, I tried to lift up the wagon out of the mud. And then they both roll low, and the GM kind of goes, oh, looks like you're not strong enough. The players go, screw that. And they go, I'm using a hero point, and I'm going to re-roll that, I see this all the time in my games too. Don't think that is just a you thing. I see that all the time. Players will basically, players hate failing checks. That's the long and the short of it. And if you are sitting on a ticket that says you get to re-roll this, I find that people will like spend them almost immediately. But yeah, now it's like you can't do that. I mean, you need that hero point to be able to you need a hero point to be able to keep your character alive if you care about it. Enticing players to waste their hero point is an important GM skill in Pathfinder 2. That's where the real deadliness is. That's why before you throw like a severe or a severe plus encounter at them, right? Before you throw a 120, 140 XP encounter at them, the first thing you have to do is have them come into a town fair where games of chance are being played. Oh, who will win the archery contest? Who can split the apple? And you're like, oh, you need to roll a 11. Oh, you only rolled an 8. Oh, you're not enough. You're not going to win the contest. Your PC is going to come in second place to some townie, some NPC. Can you, and everybody else in the party's booing them, and they're like, okay, fine, I'll spend my hero point and I'll re-roll it. And you're like, excellent. And now the Glabrazu appears, and it tears you to pieces, and you're dying, and you don't have a hero point, and so now you're dead. But again, do I want that in Pathfinder 2? No, I don't. I don't want that in Pathfinder 2. For no other reason than it takes a long time to make a character in Pathfinder 2, especially at high level. Especially at high level. It's ridiculous. So it's not good for my player. It's not good for my game. It's just a problem. But I also don't want the game to be a cakewalk, right? Because the alternative is, which arguably the game is already kind of like this, which is, hey, you are 95+% to beat this combat without any fatalities whatsoever. Maybe even more, maybe 98%, maybe 99%. For something like a moderate fight, I'm willing to bet that if you kind of figured it all out, that unless you were at the absolute bottom of the sort of, performance arc of Pathfinder 2, that you were just, that high. Now, so Nobeer says, just resurrect, bro. But Nobeer, I think that's the other issue with it. If death is just resurrect, bro, number one, resurrect and raise dead costs money. Money is something that you need in Pathfinder 2 to stay up to date with your runes, your armor, your weapon, your items. If you're spending that money to get resurrected or raised dead's very expensive, then your character is going to be under-equipped and potentially undervalued, right? And then the other problem is, let's say the cost isn't an issue. Let's say every town has a level 13, 14, 15, 20 level cleric just waiting by to cast resurrection. Then what is death? Why even have death in the game? If somebody gets killed and you go, yeah, we go back to town, we get them raised, and then we just go back to the dungeon. Like you were, I don't know, going back to pick up the milk, then death also has no purpose. So it either means something or it doesn't mean something. And if it means something, then it creates problems in the game. And if it doesn't mean anything, then it's pointless anyways. So that's the problem with the just resurrect, bro. Because to be clear, even in first edition D&D, when your character died, if you got brought back from the dead, number one, you had a % chance based off of your constitution score called the resurrection survival % chance. It was not 100%. There was a chance. There was a 3 or 4 or 5% chance, maybe even higher if your constitution was low, of the resurrection just didn't work on you and you did not come back. And you could never come back. But furthermore, when you were raised dead or resurrected, your constitution of your character was permanently reduced by 1 point, which meant that, number one, not only was there a literal maximum lifetime number of times you could be raised dead, but it also means that future raised deads would be based off of this lower constitution score, meaning your chance of surviving the resurrection was much lower. So, yeah. So again, I just think that, there was a consequence. But here's the other thing about it too. I have seen this happen. William Brandis is in this chat. That is Aaron Smith from our channel, who has played these games before. I have killed Aaron Smith's character before in like the first or second round of a BX D&D game, basic Dungeons & Dragons, Moldvay Cook, right? And before the fight is over, his new character, which he literally rolled and made while other people were taking their turns, like charged into the fight with the bandits and was like, I heard you guys, I heard some people having a hard time. I figured I'd give you a help. I was just on the nearby road there. And he just charged in, like literally, like he missed at most, I don't know, maybe 1 round of combat, right? And so like that is a very different experience than you will ever see in Pathfinder 2. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. And yes, the dying rules definitely disproportionately hurt lower levels, which is also true because even if you do have access to raise dead and resurrection and the money isn't a problem and the plot inconsistencies aren't a problem, the fact is these are not options for your characters until you're at least level 7, 8, 9, maybe 10. So if you're low level, which Number one, most characters are low level. Number two, many APs don't even go above 10th level. And number three, a lot of new players who are playing the game for the first time, they are going to be playing at levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're not going to be playing at levels 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, where they have access to this restorative magic. And so that, to me, that is a problem. We need 4 degrees of death. Right. There's mostly dead, all dead. There's different levels of dead. I know you were joking, Ronald, but there's a lot of kind of truth to that in some of these narrative games like Fabula Ultima, where when your character goes to 0 hit points and dies, you can choose to truly die and go out in a blaze of glory, or your character can suffer a loss. Maybe your character is magically cursed, right? Like I can imagine a world where your party is fighting, I don't know, night hags or something, and one of the characters goes down. The night hag hits them with a spell, a phantasmal killer spell, and they not even the instant death. It's got a new name now. I don't know what the new name for phantasmal killer is. Just the damage, the mental damage is enough, and it kills them, and they go down. And they're dead per the rules of the game. But they don't want to die. They like their character. They like their character's place in the story. They like their character's build. They like their character's spot. Everybody's having fun. So you don't kill them. But when they come back, right, they are now haunted by the power of the night, right? The night hag's magic has somehow infiltrated the character's soul, right? And now the character is cursed. They have dreams and visions of a mountain peak against a black night sky lit by rings of lightning storms. It's like, what is going on? I don't know. You don't know. Like, we're figuring it out together. There's like a narrative element to that. But the point is, your character didn't die, but there was still something happened. There was a consequence. There was a change. And I think that is what's interesting. And I think, again, making things fun and interesting, but also, powerful and balanced, that's kind of what we're going for in most of my cases. And Pathfinder 2, I mean, the modern day game that most of us are playing is very different. I get it. It's very different than the game that people played 20, 30 years ago. I still think that type of game is really cool and interesting, where I'm a hobo mercenary and I go in and I kill people and I take their treasure. Most people nowadays are in it for a more interesting story than that, which is totally fine. But then we have to change some of the rules for that. I made a priest fail his fort save back in high school. I'm just saying. Yes, also undead PCs do exist. You can't even resurrect them. Did Remastered choose to remove all the useless out-of-combat utility spells that should be rituals that take 1 turn to the caster? No, they did not. Talk about a big change up. I would love to see a very, very much expanded ritual system. Trust me. I think rituals are so cool. 4th edition used them, and they kind of ignored them too, to be honest with you, after the initial publication of them. And Pathfinder 2nd edition, I was like, oh, cool. They took one of the favorite things from 4th edition. Maybe they are going to do it right. They are going to do it justice, and they did not as much. Yeah, something like that. Again, you have to be careful in Pathfinder 2 with like the idea of like permanent disabilities or permanent injuries, because that can create a death spiral. Right? Like, one of the reasons why a lot of us have for years in Pathfinder 2 used Doomed as a sort of pseudo way of punishing a character without actually affecting their combat stats is because if you make a character be like, oh, you are, damaged by your, you weren't dead, even though you really were dead, but we don't want to actually kill you because that's problematic. But when you come back, we'll say that, you were almost dead and you were crushed. You're enfeebled too. Well, okay, if you're a melee-based, strength-based character, that is going to create a lot of problems for you within the Pathfinder 2 space. And also, it's not particularly interesting. It's just a penalty to your strength. So now I'm going to just be a less effective character. And maybe if it's something I can get healed, then it's like, okay, well, I go back to town and I get restoration spells, or I rest for a couple days, I guess, and then it's all good. And then we go back. So it never became an interesting set of circumstances, which I think is why it's important that we understand what the intention is here. Not saying that injuries aren't a bad option. I'm just saying I think we can do better. Let's see. Yes, Dungeon World has the same thing. When you die in Dungeon World, when you go to 0 hit points, you make what's called the last breath or last gasp move. And it's just a straight roll. And if you roll really badly, your character is dead. But if your character rolls high enough, they don't die, but they come back with some sort of change to their character that represents their passage to the other side. So very cool. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the, I don't know what the long and the short answer of it is, but I just think that there are things that we could consider to do. Yes, but ironically, Goblin Salvage writes, I would say that also sort of not, it kind of invalidates the point, right? Like if I chop off somebody's arm as a punishment instead of killing them, and they just, go get a new fake arm that does exactly the same thing, I feel like we haven't really created an interest. Like I don't want to punish them, right? But I also don't want them to be able to just completely hand wave the effect. I mean, to be fair, I think to your point, I think, changing the whole concept of a character around because, you got your arm taken off. Yeah. Again, I'm not really interested in it costing money or time or as an opportunity for role playing. What I'm interested in is, does this make the players play differently? Does this affect the way that their character is, what actions their character is going to take? Is there does this change the character's motivation? Does this change the character's outlook? Does this change the character's beliefs? Does this change the character's goals? Does this change the character's, we don't have alignment anymore, but alignment, right? Or, So I'm more interested in these sort of long lasting, changes to the character's essential thing and potentially to the campaign, right? Because I think that's way more interesting as well. I know that that's probably a problem for a lot of people running adventure paths, but like, our character who got killed by the night hag and now is haunted by the sort of the dreams of this storm-racked mountaintop. Maybe he goes to his party, or she goes to her party and she says, these dreams, I feel myself being pulled towards this place. I don't know what it is, but something is going to be important here. I feel like I need an answer to this. It's almost like a very Close Encounters of the Third Kind sort of effect, right? With Richard Dreyfuss's character being drawn to Devil's Monument. And obviously if you're supposed to be off saving Sandpoint, this is a problem. But if your campaign is designed to just let the characters sort of explore the space and have the world and the story evolve and change around them, which I think is the coolest way to play role-playing games, this is something that's right up that alley. So, yes, I am interested in the narrative ramifications. That's a great way to put it. For sure. Here's the thing. We have to choose if death is a mechanical punishment or a narrative punishment. That's a great way to put it, Sanderson. Mechanical punishment can't be ignored. Narrative punishments shouldn't be ignored. Well said. Well said. I agree. I actually completely agree. And what's interesting, Sanderson, this was actually kind of where I for those of you who missed that stream, where I really went into it with the death and dying rules, is when I died in a Pathfinder 2 campaign, I remember being unable to play because I wanted to make the same character, and I realized I could. My character, my level 2 or 3 fighter, level 3 fighter was dead, but I could just go make the exact same level 3 fighter and show up. But that's kind of what I wanted to play. And so then it felt like I was, I don't know, like I was not respecting my character's death. And I was like, okay, well, I could make something else, but I was kind of like, but I kind of don't want to be something else. That character is what I wanted to be. And there's nothing in the game that prevents me from just being that. Again, I could just make the same fighter with the same ancestry, basically make the same exact character. And so even when there's a mechanical effect in death, we've joked before in parties where in Pathfinder 2, somebody has died and the party's like, oh, we'll go get the resurrection or raise dead. And the person will be like, save the money. I'll just make a new character because it'll be cheaper. Right. I kind of want to make a new character anyways, but why why I'll come in with level 7 gear, and that way we don't have to like pool all of our money together, maybe sell some magical items just to get this raised dead spell. I'll just come in with a brand new character. Hell, technically you could loot my existing character, I suppose, maybe. I don't know how that works. And now you have more money by me making a new character. And then it trivializes the fact that your character dies. I mean, obviously the best case scenario is, you know, you're fighting Rune Lord Karzug in the Eye of Avarice, and you're going back and forth, and, you know, he's, you know, about to die, and in a last final ditch effort, you know, he points at your rogue, strikes him with a disintegration ray, and your rogue dies, and you're like, yeah, my character died, but what an ending, you know, like what a cool way to go out. You know, when your character dies to the random, you know, bunyip evil sea lion monster in burnt offerings, it's a little different. So that I think is where I mean, there's I think we have to respect the fact that there is a difference between those two deaths. So Pfizer just wants to increase sales for the Book of the Dead. Well, you know, and this is 100% me. A lot of people are like, oh, just come back as an undead. I hate that. Like, I get that that's totally fine for other people. The fact that Galarian is apparently a world where when people, like, there was a whole book, it came out in like 3rd edition called Ghost Walk or Ghost Touch or something, Ghost Walk. And it was about a city called Manifest, where the dead could basically walk around. It was like a boundary place between like the spirit world and the world of the living, kind of like Republic City after the Spirit Vines in Legend of Korra. And the whole premise of the game was built around this idea, this crazy concept. But when people do this in Pathfinder, it's always just so blasé. Just like, oh yeah, he died, he came back as a skeleton, it's cool. What? No, how are we just okay with this, right? Like, how are we fine with this? Yeah, like, it might be fine in, you know, a place like Geb or Jeb, but yeah, other places, come on. That's a little stretching the truth there. In a way, the game is too build focused to allow actual death. Yeah, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, death is a pain in the butt. It's a problem. You know, if you're 2 hours into your session and somebody dies in Pathfinder 2, number one, I don't think, even with the new rules change, I don't think you should be expecting to die in Pathfinder 2. Your characters are pretty strong. You have a lot of safety nets, and, you know, the encounters and the math are kind of designed to keep you mostly safe. Call it what it is. So this idea that I've got a character in my back pocket ready to go, I don't think that's true. We've been playing Pathfinder 2 for 4 years. I don't think anybody has ever had a legitimate backup character ready to go. I mean, I understand there's people out there who have 17 characters on Path Builder, but I'm talking about like a legit character that would make sense in the context of the game. And so when somebody dies, it's like you're basically saying you're kind of out for the rest of the session, especially at high levels or higher levels. Yes, I agree, Sanderson. To be honest, I like my dying rules. Resurrection was easy, but in part a mechanical penalty on their stats that could be worked off by spending downtime. Essentially meant it impacted just for a quest arc. I'm okay with that. I think that's fine. I'm more interested in sort of the narrative changes and narrative effects of the game than the mechanical ones. But, you know, I guess it comes down to like, do you want to punish your players, right? Do you want to make, you know, they died, you failed, you suck, so I want to punish you, right? I'm going to give you a penalty. I am going to give you a debuff because you played badly and you don't deserve to be in my game. So bad on you. And you're going to have to go through several sessions where you just suck, so that you can feel how bad it sucks to be bad. And then hopefully next time, maybe you'll build a better character who takes gang up and opportune backstab and preparation, so that you don't have to sit through these horrible sessions where you know, your character is mechanically hampered by all of the penalties I gave you just because some monster randomly got double crits and your character was dead. That might be okay with you. That might be the way that you want to play the game. Usually that is not the way I want to play the game. So, Nye says, one of the things that bothers me about modern D20 fantasies these days, one of the things that about modern D20 fantasies that bothers me is that characters are recipes rather than seemingly unique entities that came with insanity like 3d6 down the line. I actually completely agree with you. I have said many times on these streams, I don't like the concept of builds. I think like starting a character in a role-playing game to me should feel like starting off on an unknown adventure, right? Where you are, you're taking your bike out into the wild, into the park, and you don't know where you're going to end up, and you don't know what sights you're going to see. When you have, it's like, nope, I've got everything mapped out, right? I'm going to hit the waterfall at 10:15 a.m. And then I'm going to make it to the really cool hot dog stand by 11:30 a.m. and I can get breakfast. And then I could, and then I'm going to make sure I hit the cliffside for sunset at 8 p.m. just in time. Perfect. Like when you have the whole trip planned out, I think it loses some of the fun along the way. To me, I understand that some people love to play Path Builder. I am not one of them. This is very true. When a character does die, you finally get to see their true. Inside you, there are two wolves, right? The role-playing wolf and the optimizing wolf. Right. I love early ends to characters that aren't related to death, something that changes their purpose away from adventuring. Quagmire, I couldn't agree with you more there. Sometimes we did it because players left the game, but like, I love the idea of like, and I'm going to use Rise of the Rune Lords here. Everyone's pretty much read Rise of the Rune Lords or seen Rise of the Rune Lords. We've done Rise of the Rune Lords. You play your character and you're like, oh, my character's from the town. And then the adventure occurs and maybe the town sheriff gets killed and the party is successful. And you look at your level 4 fighter, 5 fighter and say, you know what? I think my character has realized that they never wanted to leave their hometown. This is where they're from. This is where their heart belongs, and the town needs them. So, that thirst for adventure that was originally going to take me away from the town has actually brought me back. I'm retiring my character. I'm going to be the new sheriff of Sandpoint. I think that's awesome. I think that's way cooler than being like, yeah, I got to my character level 20, check the box and beat the game. I think that's much, much cool. I don't know how often people are really doing that these days, because if you did that, right, I'm walking away from my badass build that I made on Path Builder. So I agree with you. I actually think that's really, really cool. Apparently, I'm apparently quite popular in Russia. I don't know how to feel about that. I've had a conversation in the Russian community chat, and I was accused that I was using your reasoning, saying that the fighter is better than the ranger. The fighter is better than the ranger. Again, for no other reason, like I said before, a fight starts. There's a monster over there. I want to attack it twice. Cool. The ranger goes, I spent 1 feat, level 1 feat, called Twin Takedown. The ranger goes, I'm going to stride. I'm going to hunt prey. And with one action, I'm going to attack twice. At 0 multiple attack penalty and at -5 multiple attack penalty. Then the fighter goes, I took 1 feat. I want to do the same thing. I took double slice. I'm going to stride to the enemy. I'm going to use 2 actions to make 2 attacks, and they're both going to be at 0 multiple attack penalty. So in that exact instance, the fighter did the same thing as the ranger, which is the ranger's thing, right? And they were more accurate with this. And the ranger could be like, but I have the flurry edge. Yeah, your attacks are still less accurate than the fighters. So, and that's ignoring the fact that the fighter has 2 more points of proficiency than you. So I'm just strictly talking about avoiding multiple attack penalty here, when in reality, the fighter is even better than that. So yeah. Well, that is one way to do it, Jay Strix. That is one way to do it. I know a little bit about early D&D editions, but it sounded like it was more about survival rather than narrative. And that is it's a little simplistic, but that is a fine way to view it. And I think that is fine. That is a different style of play, but you are absolutely correct. The original purpose of Dungeons and Dragons was this kind of press your luck, right? I'm literally going to risk my character's life and limb for gold and glory. My character has nothing to live for. My character is kind of a scoundrel, a mercenary, a ne'er-do-well, a vagabond, a scoundrel, a vagrant, and a merc. And so the fun of the game was just seeing how much, you could push your luck and survive. I've said this before. Forget treasure. Forget experience points. Those are all great. Forget gold. When you play an old version of D&D, if you play like something from the OSR, Shadow Dark or Knave or whatever, Maze Rats, even maybe, what's it called? Death Slayer, is that what Professor DM's game is called? But if you play basic D&D or first edition D&D, just making it to the end of the session and being like, I'm alive, feels like a reward. Regardless of how much experience or treasure you got, just surviving feels like an accomplishment. That's very different than modern RPGs. So I would actually agree with you that it is narrative. But a lot of the same rules, like when your character runs out of hit points, you die. I mean, yes, we've added a couple of hurdles to that process through, first we added -10, Death's Door. Then we added, 4th edition added death saving throws. Pathfinder 2 added dying condition. But the end of the story is still the same, right? It's still a game where now the game is more narrative than ever. And certainly, even if the mechanics of the game aren't narrative, Pathfinder 2, the way people are playing it is. Certainly, the general populace of people playing Pathfinder 2 are here to create collaborative stories, but the rules are still fairly firmly grasped back in that old, in that older mantra, that older mindset. Let's see. With 7 players, I don't have table time to explore deep character motivations and changes. Narrative death stuff just doesn't fit. We don't have time for your character arc. We've got places to go and people to see. Well, anytime you're playing with 7 players, anything that I'm saying goes out the window because that's just insane and kind of just crazy. Yeah, in a way, old D&D games were like roguelike games, except I think when people call something roguelike, you have to remember that roguelikes are usually designed where it's like, oh, you die, but you reset, but you get to keep your equipment, or you get to you get an additional point, or you get an additional level up or something. You get some sort of additional bonus to try it again. Or, and the challenges that you're going to face are essentially the same. D&D was just like, no, you're just dead. You don't get anything. You lose, good day, sir, you restart at level 1. But yes, in general, I think that's true. Rolling stats and feats can be a thing too. Rolling feats is certainly an interesting one that I don't know that I've ever heard that suggested before, but I kind of like it. This is your character. Make the best of it. Good luck. Although it would test my supposition that the feats you take in Pathfinder 2 don't really actually matter that much. It's the core math of your class chassis that really determines your characters. Certainly there are feats that give you a significant performance and advantage. We can't deny that. But I think by and large, unless you're fighting really difficult, severe encounters or extreme encounters, I think you could literally randomly pick feats for a character or not pick any feats at all. And if you were, had the right striking rune and the right potency rune, I think your character would be fine. I mean, look, that is definitely up to you. And I think that I certainly respect that decision. And if that's what your group wants, I think that you made the right decision. I mean, yeah, make it so that you die dying too. Make it real scary. Let's see. Thank you for the subscription, gentle people. We've retired more characters than we've killed. Cool. I love it. Having a plan makes things less stressful and chaotic to me. It's interesting that you've used those phrases because I like the chaos. I like the uncertainty. I like that I don't know where my character is going to end up. I don't know what challenges they're going to face. I might start my character as sort of a wastrel rogue, but for all I know, I suddenly find myself maybe in a couple levels, something happens in the campaign where my character finds faith in a way that I never expected to. And boom, now suddenly I pick up cleric dedication and I spend all the rest of my feats on cleric because that is who my character is doing. And I want to express that mechanically. I think when you have a plan, especially when it's a build and it comes online at level 12 or 14, I think it makes you less likely to do that. And I think I think that takes something away from the game. For sure. Well, awesome. Glad to see you, Red. Thanks. Let's see. Oh, that's interesting, Viking. That's kind of a cool way to do it. Yep. And that's fun because that way, like, the game continues for you, but it's still like, damn, I lost my mech, but the game and your pilot and the story behind that continues, which is really, obviously we can't really do that in Pathfinder 2 as much, but it is a cool thing that they did there. Yeah. Go on, talk about old school D&Ds. In many ways, survival was the narrative. Like, remember that time when we were all going to die and then we didn't? Yeah, that was such a cool story. I loved the arc of that. Like, I didn't think we were going to make it, and then we did. It was wild, right? Yeah, exactly. It's a press your luck heist. Again, I understand that a lot of people don't want to do this, but if you've ever had an opportunity to play like legitimate old school D&D, it can be really, really fun. Old school D&D is fun for the same reason that when you go to Vegas, like I like to, and you play craps, it's fun. Why is craps fun? Craps or roulette. You're spinning a number, you're spinning a wheel, you're getting a number. You win, you lose. Craps, I'm rolling 2d6 and I'm trying to get a number. If I get that number, I win. If a 7 comes up, I lose. That's it. It's actually a really boring game. If this was an RPG game, it'd be boring as hell. The reason it's exciting is because there's so much on the line. You might have $50, $100, I don't know, some crazy number, $1,000 on the line. And suddenly that really boring random number generation really captures your attention because there's a lot of money on the line. Well, in old school D&D, they say in Pathfinder 2, every die roll matters. I beg to differ. When you were playing first edition D&D and any attack roll could kill your character instantly. When any saving throw could kill your character instantly, trust me, that is your die roll mattering. Now, that is a very different tone of game. Absolutely. But I will say this, it makes you stand up and pay attention because it's just like gambling. There's so much on the line that even a simple, boring thing like I attack, do I hit, yes or no, instead of becoming this like transactional process, we've all played Pathfinder 2. Come on. All right, it's your turn. All right, the monster hits you, with the first attack. Okay, it's going to do 2d12 this plus d8 fire damage. You take 37 damage. Okay, then he follows up with his claw attack. It's agile, but it has multiple attack penalty. Hits again. This one does d8 plus 12. So take another 17. Okay, cool. All right, it's all very just transactional. We're just trading, bank money back and forth. So the attack, the player doesn't really care what the dice roll is because they're going to be okay. So anyways, have I ever played dual class plus free archetype? No. Although in our Northern Reaches game, which is nearing the end of season 2, we had players who played so often. We had people who were playing Pathfinder 2 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week. We had people reach level 20 so early. We had to create mythic rules, which basically let you kind of restart and gain levels again. So we ended up having characters who basically were, in some cases, dual classes, even kind of triple classed with free archetype. And the answer was they were outstandingly ridiculously powerful. King Uga Tonton did a video where his character was random. I'm gonna have to look that up. I've not seen that, and I think that would be really, really cool. But I actually thought I was like, oh, I don't have the time for this at all. But I was like, I was gonna write like a Python script or something that would basically literally randomly procedurally generate a character for you. It would just at each possible choice, literally make a random choice and then just make like 4 characters this way and then try them out in various gauntlets and see how well they could do. I did want to do this. I figured I could like somehow scrape the data from Archives of Nethys to create some sort of database to do it, but I never got around to doing it. So, let's see. Oh, we had a super chat. So what's next for Pathfinder after the remasters? That's a great question. It's a great question. So the thing about it is, well, like Mark has said, right? Pathfinder 2 came out in 2019. Mark has said that they were thinking about Pathfinder 2nd edition when D&D Next came out. So that was like 2014, 2015, which means they were thinking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition for years before we ever got wind of it and before we ever got, the beta. So to me, I have to think that this has to be like, I'm not saying it's the end game, but, we've got to be nearing, Pathfinder 2nd or Pathfinder 1st Edition, I think was from 2009 to 2019. Let's call it what it is. That was a very long time. It was 10 years, right? I don't think, 5th edition has been 10 years, and a lot of people think that is way overdone, way overdue, right? Like the new edition of 5th edition should have come out a long time ago. Before that, it was pretty usual to have, 6, 7, 8 years between editions. I have to imagine as we reach the 4-year mark of Pathfinder 2nd edition, they have to be thinking about Pathfinder 3rd edition. I'm not trying to say that it's going to come out in 2 years' time. I mean, we've got to get Starfinder 2nd edition out first, but I got to imagine that within the next 2 to 3 years, 2 years, 3 years, we'll see like a beta for Pathfinder 3. And you know what? Respectfully, Paizo, I'm here for it. Do it. You know why? Because you're finally free. Because even with this Pathfinder 2nd Edition remaster, which is on the ORC and not the OGL, the fact of the matter is you are still shackled to the legacy of your game because you don't want to screw over all the people who have invested in your game. I respect that. You made a tough business decision and you did the best with it that you could. And I think, you didn't hit on everything that I would like for you to hit on, but by and large, I think you did a great job, especially given what I'm sure were insane time constraints. So fantastic. But the fact of the matter is, I think you've got some incredible people over there who are doing some incredible work. And I see glimpses of the brilliance in some of the design decisions, the ones that the less and less a class looks like something that you would see from D&D, like the kineticist, the more and more I am interested. So that tells me that I think that you are being held back by the legacy of the D20 system. I think you're being held back. I think you're better than that. And I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with D20. I'm just saying, I think Pathfinder 3rd edition could be something spectacular. And you're seeing, some of these changes, like Matt Colville is coming out with his game system, Daggerheart. Critical Role's coming out with Daggerheart. Dungeon Coach is coming out with DC 20. And these things are in some instances, fairly significant departures from what we would traditionally consider that sort of core axis of D20. 6 stats, armor class, saving throws, hit points, weapon, attack roll, that skills, like that basic framework. And I think we could do something different. I don't think we don't have to be a D&D clone anymore. I know Pathfinder 2nd edition is different than D&D, but let's call it what it is. Okay. It is fundamentally a game that is based off of Dungeons and Dragons. And it doesn't have to be anymore. It has its own fan base. There are people who are going to go with wherever this game, wherever this game company chooses to go with. And I think they should take advantage of that. They have a very loyal fan base. Take advantage of that. Not in a bad way, but like in a way to really expand, explore the space. And I would love to see it. See, 25 is just after the remaster has finished coming out. I don't think they're going to dump the PF3 beta right then. No, I agree. I think 2025 is going to be, well, I don't know. The remaster is technically finished in early 2024. So I think we'll see like Starfinder 3 beta stuff or Starfinder 2 beta stuff, probably end of 24. Starfinder will come out in 25. So maybe we'll see PF3 beta in like 26 with a release of 27. So that would be my guess. I don't know. But all I do know is 10 years this way is too dang long. So, and that would make it, if it came out in 27, that would be 8 years, which again, so yeah, I go, yep. By the way, by the time we get to that time, RPGs won't even be printed on paper anymore. Everything will be digital and you'll just hook your player's handbook into your brain stem. And, then you'll be good for that. Just in time for 6th edition. Yeah. I saw that like It's going to get like, I thought for sure, I was like, this thing was going to launch at Gen Con, but it really shows that Wizards of the Coast doesn't really care about Gen Con anymore. Right? Like that's not what their basis is that's not what their fan base is really tied to. It's not where they make their money. And so like, it seems like there's a lot of people are like, there's no way that they're going to be able to hit an August release date. And that now it's sounding like it's going to be later in 2024, which is probably good for Paizo, So let's see. General temperature check towards MCDM system. Loving what I've seen so far. I think it looks really cool. They have a mindset that I can agree with mostly. They're addressing a lot of the things that I have problems with in the game. They're focusing on tactical resource accumulation. I mean, again, the game that I've always wanted to build has been basically 4th edition D&D, but 4th edition D&D has the problem that you have all your powers and abilities. You can just use them. You can use them all in round 1, but like, that's just not how cinematic moments work. Right. Voltron, the Voltron force doesn't form Voltron at the very first minute. They fight in their lions first, they build up to it, then they turn into Voltron, then they fight as Voltron, then they summon the big sword, right? Power Rangers did the same thing, right? Yeah, escalation die from 13th Age is a way of doing it, but the escalation die from 13th Age is more of a more of a carrot. The escalation die from 13th Age says, hey, you could use your really cool, powerful daily bonus ability in the first round, but you might miss. If you wait a couple rounds, then you might have a +2 or +3 or +4 bonus to hit, and that'll be a lot cooler, right? And you go, yeah, it probably would be, but it doesn't force you to wait. Whereas a resource accumulation system is, I think, a little bit more interesting, where your character has powerful abilities, but they cost, imagine your barbarian that had something called the rage pool. And there were things that you could do in your turn to build up points in your rage pool, active things, decision-based things that you could do in your rage pool. That would give you more rage points. And then in round 2, you go, I've got a couple rage points now. I could use them on this somewhat powerful ability, or I could save them for like an even more insane power that I could use in round 3. And so now you're making these really interesting decisions. Like, is it better to cash in my points now and use it on this minor ability, or should I save them and wait to do something really, really cool and awesome? And at the end of the day, if you do choose to do something really powerful and big and spectacular and explosive, it'll probably occur in like the 3rd or 4th round of the combat, when the combat should probably be coming to an end anyways. And so it feels very cinematic, and it feels very appropriate, and it feels like you earned that victory and you earned that moment because your character choices throughout the first couple of rounds of that combat, and maybe your team's choices, helped contribute to that end state where you were able to sort of deliver on that. Anyways, MCDM seems to be doing that. that has been my dream of what I've wanted out of a game system. I'm just, I'm not a game designer, so I don't have the mind for it like some of these people do, to like lay out the structures and the systems. I'm more of a floaty idea guy. And so anyways, yeah, I think it looks really cool, the MCDM system. Let's see here. Self-confessed Nick says, 4 more years of this. Oh God, you're not playing Pathfinder 2 anyways. You're playing some hack of a hack of a hack at this point as well. So, at the end of that line of thought lies Magic the Gathering. No, not exactly, because even Magic the Gathering doesn't really work like that. The other thing is too, like I'm really obsessed with this idea of getting rid of output randomness and dealing with input randomness, which I know is also more like Magic the Gathering. But the more I think about it, the more I am so displeased with this idea of making your decision and then rolling and seeing if it worked or not. I just think that is so less interesting than anything else. Where can I take a look at the MCDM system? Well, Grim Prism, Matt Colville, and his channel does a lot of videos where he talks about the evolution of the system, but most of his announcements and information are part of his Patreon. I actually joined his Patreon earlier this year just so that I could get those updates on it, but that is where most of what is publicly available is available. There have also been a couple of people who have played in some of the playtests, and they have done videos, so I'm sure if you look up, like if you Google or YouTube MCDM playtest, you'll see people talking about the game. All right, we're going to start wrapping up here. Famous last words. What do we think of Black Flag? Haven't taken a look at it, Mikey. Sorry. Even if I wouldn't be the right person to take a look at it, Mikey. Honestly, I don't know enough about 5th edition and its core problems to really be able to offer you a thought on how good Kobold Press's version is. So, again, you should really try Kamagakari. Input randomness is very baked into the system. I think I remember you mentioning this before. Let me take a look at this. What is Kami? Obviously, it sounds something like with God Hunters. Okay, interesting. It's like an anime game, huh? It is an action-packed Japanese RPG about everyday people imbued with shards of godhood. Fight epic supernatural battles. Godly powers deserve godly weapons. Control your roll. Use the dice control system to save yourself from bad rolls, but use it sparingly. Anyways, okay. Well, hey, if you're going to buy something from DriveThruRPG, use our link in the description below. It's our affiliate link, and we get a couple percentage points back, and that's how I'm able to buy PDFs to look at people's randomly suggested games so that I don't go bankrupt. I do so because I make about, $10-15 a month off of DriveThruRPG because of folks like you. So appreciate it. Yeah. Interesting isn't necessarily fun. Have to make sure the system plays into the fantasy. 100%. What we're probably going to do Thursday is Mark Rosewater, who I respect the hell out of. Mark Rosewater has been head of design over at Magic the Gathering for over 20 years. And he did a speech at a game design conference a couple years ago where he called it 20 Lessons from 20 Years of Working on Magic the Gathering. And it's sort of more of a systematic about lessons about game design. And it's just a fantastic speech, and I'd love to just talk about it with you all. And, well, number one, introduce you to it if you're not familiar with it, but also give it kind of my specific context to role-playing games and how we might think about it. But one of the findings that he had is that just because something is interesting doesn't mean it's fun. And that is something I think a lot of would-be game designers, myself included, miss often. Just because something is academically interesting and, ooh, it's this and I'll do this and doesn't make it fun. Sometimes it's fun. But just because something's interesting doesn't make it fun. So that's very important. You hated the Tome of Battle class that shuffled their powers. The Crusader. Whereas I liked it. Finally got to the stream. Time to wrap up. Well, Mighty Dave, sometimes that's how it goes, buddy. But again, look, if you guys have thoughts or comments or questions, please let me know. I'm kind of, I've kind of said what I want to say. Again, for people who maybe missed it or earlier who didn't have it, which is, I think the remaster overall was a success. There were some problems with it. That I think are, I would say, unacceptable. If they turn out to be problems, I don't know, maybe they intended to make the rogue have, 3 saves that hell have save specialization. But I do think that there's a couple of things in there that they changed, and it wasn't really quite clear why they changed it. And maybe things got a little bit too powerful. I think some of the classes got much needed improvements. And I think some other classes that I would have liked to have seen significant improvements on did not. So that was a little disappointing. But overall, I'm going to say B-. I think that, the changes by and large were welcomed. And I think that they addressed some of the core issues that many people had. And in some ways actually kind of, reaffirmed some of my belief in some of my criticisms of the game. I know a lot of people thought, oh, the aid rules are stupid. That DC's too low. it should scale and be tied to player level. And so when you're higher level, the DC should be like 37 or 38. And I never thought that was true. I think that's entirely counter purpose to what aid was trying to be. And I make my aid automatic. Well, they didn't make it automatic, but they did lower the DC and they didn't make it scaling. Like, right. So clearly in that regard, like, you know, our thought process was sort of aligned in that respect. They changed disarm to literally what I thought it should be. The shield runes is exactly how I've been running it. So a lot of things that I thought, oh, this is how I would do it. You know, that's how they did it. And I think that was, you know, for me personally, that was like, oh, nice. Like these are welcome changes. I appreciate it. Let's see here. It's time to wrap this up. Begins Googling anime TTRPGs. Yeah, it's never a good sign. So, you know, Strat, you missed the earlier. I don't know if you saw the earlier part of the stream, Strat, but I was specifically complaining about the way that you played investigators in Northern Reaches, involving standing outside of the back, you know, standing outside of the door and listening and saying, "Oh, I'm pursuing a lead." Well, not pat myself on the back. It's more that, you know, sometimes I get accused, rightfully so, maybe, I don't know, of being very negative and being very critical about the game, which I am. There is no doubt about that. But sometimes, and even I am not 100% immune. I'm mostly immune to what everybody says. I don't care what everybody says, but sometimes I'm like, man, am I really just missing something here? Or am I really just that far off base with how I think the game should be played? Like, I know that I'm not the target demographic, but man, I feel like I'm pretty right on this one. So sometimes it's nice to see that I'm not entirely, you know, just being a negative asshole, and that sometimes my complaints actually have some validity to the point where, you know, Paizo also agrees and makes, you know, some changes, you know, to things that I maybe thought. Again, it's not like, oh, they listened to me. No. I'm just saying I thought this was a problem, and oh, okay, they thought it was a problem too, and they changed it. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's more of a validation of the criticism rather than like, oh, I'm so smart and Paizo listening to me. No, nothing like that. Far from it. Yes, you missed that part. Yeah. Absolutely not. Although Joshua Birdsong is a designer now over at Paizo, and I Am Prophet has been a member of Knights of Last Call Discord for a very, very long time. So in a way, I like to think that the spirit of Knights of Last Call, although I Am Prophet is much nicer than me, that the spirit of Knights of Last Call is there in Paizo's design department. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. Any thoughts on how emanations as written don't move with a caster, but the aura trait is missing from spells like Bless and Vanishing Tracks? I feel like they should move with the caster. They don't. That would be news to me. That would be potentially problematic. Let's see here. Sometimes a spell has a emanation or a line. Okay, that doesn't help me. Cool. Here we go. Emanation. An emanation issues forth from each side of your space, extending out to a specified number of feet in all directions. Unless this text states otherwise, the creature creating an emanation effect chooses whether the creature at the center is affected. It sounds like it's always moving out. I mean, as written in the player's core, it says it issues from each side of your space. So I think that means that at all times it is emanating from all sides of your space. So I would think it would move with you by proxy. Save Versus with $5 says, I'm calling it now. PF3E is going to move to an at-will encounter or daily feat system. I mean, to be clear, Pathfinder 2nd Edition already has an at-will encounter and daily power. They call them cantrips, focus spells, and spell slots. But obviously martial characters don't have that, but there are a number of martial abilities that are not magical in the slightest, but they somehow mysteriously only work once a day. It's kind of strange. Although they did buff Bless. Did you know that? Their self-confessed cynic? They did. So this is another thing. In my campaign, we had a war priest, and I buffed Bless I house ruled Bless in my game. I made it so that as a one, you could cast it as a 1, 2, or 3 action spell. And as a 1 action spell, it was the Bless as written, where it was a 5-foot emanation, and every round that you sustained it, you could push out the radius by 5 feet. And then I made the 2 action version of Bless a larger initial circle, like 10, maybe 20 feet. And that every time you sustained it, it would go out another 10 feet. And then I made the 3 action version of Bless, just like everybody in the battlefield, don't worry about it. Like once you take 3 actions to cast Bless, everybody has Bless, and we don't have to worry about it for the rest of the game. If you want to give up your whole round to be able to do that, I am willing to just say everybody is blessed. But they updated Bless. And now when you cast Bless, it's 2 actions, and the initial area is a 15-foot emanation. So it used to be a 5-foot emanation. It is now a 15-foot emanation. And on subsequent rounds, you can sustain the spell if you want to. You don't have to. And it increases the radius by 10 feet, not 5 feet. So it's a 15-foot emanation. So that's 15 feet on one side of you, 15 feet on another. So it's a much bigger emanation. It's a 30-foot, emanation. 30-foot diameter, 35-foot diameter thing. And you could really quickly update it. So Bless is much better. I would say this, like, I like the idea of zones. I would call those zones, not emanations. I think that gives the game more tactical depth, but that's not quite how it's worked right now. All right. Well, love that we're covering the 20 questions on Thursday. We're going to get through like 4 rules. Well, the good news is I have off Friday. My company has a lot of military connections, and so as we're being giving Friday off for Veterans Day, so I don't have to work on Friday. So Thursday night we can go late. We can talk about Mark Rosewater forever and game design. If Bless lasts 10 rounds and scales each round, why you just let the cleric choose how many ticks it goes up? I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, Ian. Well, Bless, you don't have to sustain it. So like you can bump it up by 5 rounds and 1 sustain. It's just losing its life by. Oh, I got you. I mean, that's an interesting option, trading duration for effect. I don't hate it. Translation, we'll get through 6. I'm going to 10. We're going to get through 10 at least. All right. But hey, thanks everybody for hanging out with me. Again, if you want more specific breakdown details of all the nitty gritty changes, check out Roll for Combat. They did 5 videos last week. They did 5 videos this week. I'm on some of them where particularly Mark Seifter, are go through every single change in all the classes. Or go check out the Rules Lawyer. I consider him now the sort of the go-to Pathfinder 2 channel on YouTube, and he has been putting out really long videos where he is doing deep dives into each one of these classes that we talked about. And so I consider that between Roll for Combat and Mark Seifter and Rules Lawyer with Ronald, like they have you covered. The reason why I did this is because we did a poll and about 500 or 600 of you have said, we don't need the details. Other people are doing the details. Let's just hear what you have to say. And again, I think a lot of other people have really gone into the details about the specific changes. I don't know all the changes. I'm sure there'll be reactions to some of them as I'm aware of them. I do think that, buffing the rogue inexplicable. Not buffing the ranger, inexplicable. So the buffing the divine spell list and the cleric feat list, especially the war priest, A+, fantastic idea, right? So good decisions, questionable decisions. But I think the fighter is still going to be the GOAT that they always were. But you know what? Enjoy your time in the sun, fighter. It's shout out. I should shout out Goblin Salvage Rights. They're really cool too. All right, well, I'll shout out Goblin Salvage Rights as well. I have no problem with that. So I will, but Ryan coming in with 5 Swiss francs with a super chat. Thank you, Ryan. I don't know what your super chat was. You just threw $5 at me, but I appreciate it, Ryan. Thank you. You are.
I am strong.
That's you, buddy.
Strong.
That's right, Quagmire. And if you want to see the double showdown on Friday, you're going to have Ronald, the rules lawyer, on Roll for Combat with Steven and Mark. And they're going to be talking about the GM core. But I imagine that most of the conversation really is just going to be about the remaster. So I really think if you really want to watch a video, like that's the one to watch. So I think that'll be pretty good. Thanks. Look, you've got fans. They're here supporting you. I'm here for it. I love community, and I love it when people, go out of their way to make sure that other people get taken care of. But also, I think that's a really fantastic name for a channel. So Goblin Salvage Rights. So they just hit 1K subs. Let's go check them out. So worth taking a look, right? Now we're gonna put you to the task. So yeah, thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. But what do you feel about death? I told you how I feel about death. I think that death is mostly problematic, except for games that are designed to be burn bright, burn hot, but not burn long, right? D&D games where you can make a character in under 5 or 10 minutes, where you're rolling randomly for your character stats, so that the process of creating a character is almost an exercise in randomness. Death is just the beginning. Mummy and The Mummy Returns are honestly probably 2 of the greatest movies, in my personal opinion, D&D movies that have ever been made, especially the second one. The second Mummy Returns, is, I think, the quintessential adventure film. It is so good. It is so good. Anyways, they also have the kid in the movie, and he's somehow not annoying. He's actually awesome, and you actually really like him. And he's not incompetent. He's not annoying. He's funny. It's fantastic. He pairs so well with Jonathan. It's a shame that the third movie, really kind of sucked. They made a third one, but I think they lost one of the characters. I think Rachel Weisz maybe wasn't in the third movie. It was like Tomb of the Dragon, Emperor. It wasn't as good. It was not as good. But the first 2, bangers, all timers. Yeah. Brendan Fraser was just the man. There was that was the era of peak Brendan Fraser. He's just a gorgeous, let's just call it what he is too. He's absolutely stunningly gorgeous man. Rachel Weisz, absolutely stunningly gorgeous woman. Like, the movie was just full of beautiful people, right? I think that death is mostly problematic. You're gonna have to get that clipped. And by the way, if you are a member of the Patreon and you want to see Aaron's a little bit more, we'll call it detailed review of the Pathfinder 2 Remastered, that is available on our Patreon. It's about an hour and 40 or 50-minute clip. And for some of our patrons, they have said it's one of the funniest things they've ever seen. In fact, Self-Confessed Cynic, who you've seen here tonight, has been a patron of ours since the very beginning, since we first started, back from our Rise of the Rune Lords days. And he says it's one of his top 3 favorite videos / streams that we've ever made. Might be the best video the Knights have ever made. So yeah, exactly. So he's he, top 3 is that 2-3 is supposed to be top 3. Might be the best video the Knights have ever made, at least in the top 3. And again, it's actually we were able to get the license for the background music. YouTube removed the copyright claim. But the question remains, is it something that we could ever release to the public? And my thought there is probably no. But it is sort of a scathing satirical take on Paizo and Paizo fans and Pathfinder 2 and the remaster. And it's pretty funny. There's some pretty great moments there that are legitimately chuckle worthy. Because remember, we play these games, we love these games. But this isn't the only game that we play. And so I think that what Knights of the Last Call bring you is criticism. And when we criticize a game, we're not criticizing you. We're not criticizing your choice to play the game that you choose to play. Just because a game isn't for me doesn't mean it's not for you. Just because I think a class isn't powerful doesn't mean you might even agree that the class is not powerful. That doesn't mean you can't have fun playing it. Of course you can. Of course you can. So just remember that, the criticism here is designed to be helpful, not to take anybody down, not to try to bash you. In fact, if anything, I'm trying to just make you more aware of what this complex and very involved hobby has to offer. And that being critical of the game that you play, and role-playing games put a tremendous amount of power into your hand as a player and a GM to shape and shift and change the game, to look into different systems, to steal what you like, to ignore what you don't. And so you need to be very mindful about it, because sometimes these effects do have unintended consequences. Steinwein, what tier is his video? I don't see it. It's available. I think we publicly posted it on the Patreon. I think there was a announcement for it on the thing. I'm sure it's just sitting in one of the channels, but yeah, I mean, I'll repost it. Okay. Because that way you can see it. I'll post it on the Patreon page itself, not just in the Discord, but on the Patreon page itself. Guitar Guy Nick, but by the way, I just got confirmation from the Foundry Dev team that anything you want from the older stuff will be in a legacy module. Interesting. Okay. So that, I think that's a good thing. I mean, it does make it a little bit more confusing for sure. But yeah, I think that's probably, I mean, that is a welcome news. So that's pretty good. It is not a shit post. It's a Smith post. Yes, it is part of a series that Smith has done. If you think Derek didn't go hard enough, Smith got you covered in the Patreon video. Yes, he absolutely does. And again, with some legitimately very chuckle funny little skits that he threw in there. It's pretty good. Well, thanks, Goblin Salvage Rights, and good luck with your channel. Hopefully you find some good success. Get yourself monetized there soon. Oh, see, I like their style here. They've got they're smart. They're doing short videos that people can actually watch, but then they're also doing long videos where you actually get to talk about things. Yeah, see, we stopped doing short video. We never could do short videos because we always just kept talking, and then no one listened to us because it's way too long. So already smarter than me. I appreciate that. Yes. All right. Boothby, evening as we're about to leave. So good call. Oh, okay. Okay. You just got monetized. All right. Well, congrats. Awesome. Yeah, I didn't know if you had the watch hours, but that's great. That's perfect. Well, congratulations. That's a big accomplishment for sure. Yeah, we just got to 10K not that long ago. So it's pretty cool. We do 2 shorts and 2 podcasts a month. Very cool. It's a good balance. I like it. All right, folks. Well, we're going to be back Thursday. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate everybody who came out tonight and joined the stream. Thank you for everybody who decided to throw some support our way. Thank you to Steinwand, Ryan Winter, Save Versus, Self-Confessed Cynic, of course. Evan, Cybersmith, Shawnit, Jason B, Whipplestein, Elliot, Henry Epp, and John Bonanza. Thank you so much for all your support. Thank you to everybody else. You know, I understand maybe you can't come in here and everybody can't throw in a tip. That's okay. You're here for the conversation. That's what makes these streams possible, is this active conversation. It's what I love about this channel. It's what I love about doing these streams. I like talking to all of you. So I appreciate all of you coming and hanging out with me. We'll be back Thursday to talk about more unpopular stuff like theoretical game design and how the principles of Mark Rosewater's 20 years and 20 lessons from game design and Magic the Gathering apply to role-playing games, and how we should be thinking differently and more critically about what role-playing games we play and about how we should think about designing role-playing games in the future. All right. I am going to go. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I will see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace out, everybody. See you.